Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Today it's the 21st of November. It's the Norwich City Council Audit Committee meeting. We'll look over to the agenda. Item 1 on the agenda, apologies. Have we received apologies?
Yes, Chair. We've had apologies from Councillor Fulton McAllister, who's on, I believe, other council business. He has arranged a substitute, which is Councillor Princey.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
And we're waiting for Councillor Kidman to join us.
Yeah, excellent. We know she's on the way, so that's brilliant. So item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations? See none. So we'll move on to agenda point 3, which is the public questions and petitions. Have we had any?
No, Chair.
No, we haven't. Okay, so that moves us over to 4, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. They've been circulated in advance of the meeting. Does everyone concur that they are accurate record of the meeting? Any issues or typos that anyone wishes to point out? I see no indication, so the committee accept those minutes. Thank you. And item 5. So at this point we're going to switch around the agenda in order to facilitate officer resource. Item 5 was to be the draft annual governance statement, but what we're going to do is move item 8 forward, which is the learning lessons from failings in other authorities. Effectively, this was on request of the work done by the Audit Committee, and obviously in the kind of financial predicaments that many councils find themselves, it's only prudent for this council to do a report to this committee on it, and so I'll hand over to Gareth to introduce the report. Thank you. Page 221.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report was produced by the monitoring officer. Unfortunately, it's not available today, but broadly speaking, much of this report was influenced by myself and the section 151 officer, because of course we're very deeply concerned about the matter in it, particularly around financial governance. This report provides an overview of the failings of councils across the country. It will not cover every circumstance. You can never tell what might happen. For instance, a severe cyber attack as is experienced in Redcar and Cleveland can be absolutely debilitating, and you saw some circumstance in Hackney where they had more resources, more capacity, so they manage it better, but it can really put a council at enormous risk. However, financial governance does tend to be the core of the majority of failed councils, if you want to call it that, or councils in Section 114 territory. So 7, if not more, councils issued these Section 114 notices that are currently in effect. In practice, over 10 councils have issued warnings, and without funding improvements, those numbers could increase. And if you're really interested, Room 151 actually does keep a running tally on these issues, which is a website looking at this kind of issue and what issues from a finance perspective of the matter. There is some you can hear about Birmingham, Slough, Northamptonshire, Thurrock. It's a very wide-ranging situation, but it's worth noting in the bigger picture. Our debt of £207 million is not like Wokkingham's £2 billion-ish. Broadly speaking, we're in a very different kettle of fish for the most point across the entire piece. Section 114 is not quite the same as bankruptcy. That's a private sector concept. In local government, it's more about you can only provide, if you've got Section 114, you need to move to only providing services which are statutory, and discretionary spend must be stopped across the authority. And it gives much more wide-ranging powers effectively to Section 151 to put in place emergency measures. This council is not in that place, and in many ways, much of the stuff here is about warning lessons and things we can do to ensure we never get into that place. We're currently running a surplus and have a balanced budget for this medium-term financial plan and over the next 3. We're moving towards a 5-year TFP plan, and would like to have savings to cover all the gaps in future years. This is a traditional and soundly run council in terms of its finances. This is, in many ways, a story of what Norwich is not doing for the most part. We have made some of the changes already ahead of time of many of these risks, but it's really worth having a detailed look at what happens here, what risks are out there. There is a budget validation process as reports internally. There's a positive LGA corporate peer review, and if you read on to paragraph 13, you can see a variety of ways which we can achieve assurance across the entire report. The role of the statutory officers, on to my right, the new who's Rawthorne, head of paid service, and the monitoring officer, the role of the internal auditor, This committee itself as a whole provides assurance that challenge, make sure governance is in the correct place. Their quarterly reporting on the financial positions in terms of the finances, in terms of risk, and in terms of performance is looked at on a quarterly basis. And service peer reviews, and many more items behind. This council takes governance incredibly seriously. Reporting processes here are generally robust, and we have a credible audit committee that challenges robustly. There's always more that we can do, but generally speaking, when we've had areas of improvement, we've looked to make them. There's a Treasury Management Board in place at the moment in time, and the council's moving to strengthen its capital governance with a new internal capital board. Now, there are two companies, and the report does raise that as an area of further improvement, broadly speaking, both which have had some challenges, but governance overall is improving, and so is financial performance. Now, item 27 examines financial governance and Norwich's position in more detail, how we compare it across, broadly speaking. So the first item refers to capability of the finance staff themselves. So the council has always been able to obtain a sufficiently capable finance staff, but it is overly reliant on agency staff, and that is one area we look to improve. Already, what we're seeing here is new Section 151 is hired, and the process is going to hire through the other positions as well. So there'll be further strengthening taking place in this area, but it is recognised as a concern, so we're taking it very seriously. So the overarching position, lack of effective financial planning, is a major concern of a lot of councils. That is not the case here. I basically personally looked at the actual 23-24 savings. We've achieved 5.2 out of £5.7 million. It's quite robust. Overall, we're running towards a £3 million plus surplus in the current year, and there's a lot of one-off savings here. Let's look right on that. But overall, it's because we continually challenge and ensure that we live on the savings put in place and that they're credible, sensible, and ones which once again are written out. And we're looking at future years. A lot of councils put in savings and they're not credible. That is not the case here. We review, we challenge, and we're looking at future savings and doing a robust process internally to make sure that the MTFP is robust and it's going to be strong in the long term. Quite frankly, most councils would dream of having our financial position because we've done the right things earlier. So we'd use this report as to keep doing the same things and examine areas of which, things we could do significantly better. We are very concerned about warning signs and take early steps much earlier. That's one difference. That's why we look at future savings and we look at treasury borrowing with such levels of concern at all points in time, and why we have a view of companies generally. And the overarching thing is, do you believe you challenge with the audit committee? I must admit we've seen some pretty robust challenges here. So I'm fairly confident that internal audit have been raising the standards gradually speaking, and already spoken to Teresa about how we could further improve the processes. Generally speaking, challenge our finance is getting better, but there are certainly areas for improvement there, and we're really looking to strengthen our risk management across the piece. We've updated our risk management policy most recently internally, and basically there'll be more resource coming in to make sure we look at risk costing type piece, but all our project documentation includes risk automatically and mitigation strategies. We're looking further more how we can get better at this area. Risk is discussed regularly at SLT, and with regards to projects as a matter of course, and the majority of these projects have full-blown local risk registers. Now, the areas of improvement, how risk flows to the authority, we want to examine the top level risks, are they the appropriate ones, and that those pieces of work taking place need to come back to you probably. We'll sometime in the next 3 to 6 months, we'll come back to you and update your position on the high-level risks. Now, there are sectoral concerns, and generally speaking, I prefer to have the NEF respond more widely on these matters than a day as an highly experienced Section 151, basically going back a decade, 2. Sorry, but a very experienced Section 151 who worked across the sector in a very variety of experiences. Obviously, from my point of view, you can just see the local pressures on local government, but Norwich is doing a lot of the right things to strengthen its governance. It's got an internal future shaped Norwich board, which is not guaranteed, but is putting a rigorous challenge across the entire piece to make sure we put savings forward that are credible, the governance is credible, and we don't see these problems. Now, there are areas of definite concern. Companies often come up here, and there are definitely very strong oversight bodies, and we are seeing that direction of travel. Overall, there's far more we could do, and we are looking to do that far more. But generally speaking, the one thing this report will tell you, broadly speaking, is we're doing better overall, even more, and we'll be coming back to you with further those improvements. But broadly speaking, this is an area where, relatively speaking, I'm very confident that the position is on a positive trajectory, and it's already quite robust already.
Lovely, thanks Gareth. Gareth's covered, a lot of the important points. I think what I'd say is try not to get obsessed with Section 114s. They are a sort of a tool in the armoury of the Chief Finance Officer, where there is to avoid getting into the worst situations that we've seen financially. The report focuses on a lot broader interventions, and I think that's important because, as Gareth has said, as far as I'm concerned, and you'll draw your own conclusions, but Norwich is in a strong financial position, and so it's unlikely that there would be a Section 114 restricting expenditure to statutory items. But that's a very sort of narrow definition that lots of people in the sector are focusing on at the moment, because financially times continue to be tough. But I think if you look at some of the earlier interventions, and as the report says, they were often on more broader governance concerns, and indeed, the South Cambridgeshire example, much more recently, shows how the government involves itself and intervenes in many different ways, and so this is about a broader governance issue, and I think that's one of the key messages for this committee, that you should, we're dealing with the annual governance statement today. It's really important that you focus on those sorts of areas as well. As Gareth has said, financially, some of the decisions that some of the authorities have found themselves in are quite unique. So in that sense, not difficult to avoid, but we should never be complacent about these things. And as a Section 151 officer, it's really important to me that the key governance controls around audit, scrutiny, and the role of members is really taken seriously. So just to add my emphasis to what Gareth has said already, that it's something that Norwich is good at, can always be better, but we need to make sure that we keep our guard up on the key governance issues.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Before I let committee in, Councillor Kendrick would like to add a few points.
Thank you very much. Well, 2 weeks ago, I spent a week in Bristol, at no expense to this local authority paid for by the government. It was actually meant to train people like myself with political and financial experience to go into other councils who are in financial difficulties. Now, whilst a lot of the information was quite confidential, I can assure you that the stories that we heard were really quite horrible about what happened at other local councils. Some is in the public domain, so I can repeat it. Is it, for example, member-officer relationships were so bad in Birmingham that when the senior finance officer issued the 144 notice, he didn't even tell the leader of the council. And to be honest, those councils that have failed have often had major problems in terms of officer-member relations. Similarly doesn't happen here. Our Norwich City Council is well regarded within this sector for its financial management, which, well, I have to be honest, once was in a difficulty. Certainly, look around about the 2005 stage when the Democrats were running the authority, there was a stage when there was a £3 million black hole in our finances, and the level of financial reporting to members on this authority has improved immensely over the last few years. And I think Neville, and indeed really previous Section 151 officers, were very much following my own personal lead that we should be transparent with other members. Sadly, this was not the case in many other councils, where such financial information was just basically kept to the best leader of the council and the finance cabinet member. And frankly, some of the information in some of those councils had little in contact with the reality, with the tragic results, as you see. And they are actually tragic. Because, for example, if you look at a place like Barrowford's, a place with a number of social problems, 35% now of their council tax income, or indeed general revenue that they raise now has to be paid back by the government because they basically had to take a large loan from the government. So that means it can't be used on vital council services. But I think, there are some horror stories on the spectrum. We're very much at the other end. We have a very positive relationship, I think, between members and officers here. And I think we have the financial safeguards that have been mentioned and the transparency that mean we are in a far, far better place.
Thank you for that, and I'll let the Lord Mayor in a moment. I would add that definitely that there's been a massive improvement in sharing information across the council, and also empowering councillors to be able to understand and make relevant challenge. I wouldn't put it as far back as 2003. Much of that's happened in the last 2, 3, 4 years to get to a level of compliance that we should have always had, and we know that it's an ongoing journey which we can continue to improve at. But I'll let James in at this point.
Thank you, Chair.
Followed by Councillor Sands, Councillor Osborne.
Picking up on Councillor Kendrick's point first, it's interesting. We have come a long way. I joined this audit committee in the back half of 2010, and at that point the big sort of hot potato was that we made a secret payment to settle some legal action, and as this audit committee we were told that we could not know the amount of that payment. It was outside of our remit, but yet how could we audit how can we fulfil our role if we were not able to get all the information? So I think we have moved on a lot, but actually that wasn't the point I was originally going to make when I indicated. I'm intrigued, actually, picking up on the South Cambs issue, really what a sort of best value notice is. I mean, politically, and this is going to be difficult for officers to respond to, but I think politically, this is potentially a sort of an interventionist government using some of the tools available to itself in order to perhaps stop councils doing some of the things that they might want to, that don't sit with the sort of current politics. But I wonder, what is the best value notice? Could you sort of explain a bit more for me as to how that can be used by central government? Thank you.
Yeah, so all authorities are under a duty to provide best value, and commonly it's described as, the 3 E's: economy, efficiency and effectiveness. What's happened at South Cambridge, to my mind, this is my view, that somebody has looked very, very bluntly, very broadly at a situation, saying, well, we're still paying 100% of the salary, and people are working 4 days a week, so we're getting 80% of the output we're paying for. QED, that's not the most effective or efficient use of resources. And regulation allows the Minister to issue a best value notice, essentially saying we do not believe that you've complied with the best value duty, and there are timescales in which South Cambridgeshire have then to respond. But the sort of progression of events past that leads you to a similar sort of intervention that you're seeing in many of these other authorities, where commissioners might well be put in, or additional oversight made to overturn some of those decisions. So that's the sort of the statutory background that sits behind it, and whether my analysis is absolutely correct, that's the sort of the premise that's being portrayed out in the public arena.
So actually, unlike another authority that might be financial,
yes, this
doesn't necessarily have to be an evidential process to get into that point. It's a ministerial win, for want of a better phrase. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Sands.
Thank you, Chair. One of the things which we've been concerned at audit over the last 3 years is the inadequacy of external auditors to actually do their job. And I suppose that must be a concern, because of course their job is to potentially pick up the things that we may have missed. Now, I've got every confidence in our officers in City Hall. We seem time and time again to have been ahead of the game. But the trouble is, with external auditors not doing their job, there's possibly a sense of complacency that can creep in. So I'd like to know what the risks of that are. And also, this offlog that's mentioned, is that a government attempt to overcome the inadequacy of the external auditors?
No.
No.
So if I answer the second question first, it's not really. This is, the government portrays it as a sort of a bastion of good practice. They'll build up good practice and they'll build up an evidential base of who does things really well, a bit like benchmarking. I mean, it's really analogous with the Audit Commission that that was abolished. They're sort of creating a version of that, slightly watered down, but that's what that is all about. It's supposed to be another form of sector-led improvement that's available to the sector. Sort of turning to your first question, I mean, I have a statutory duty when I sign off the accounts to ensure myself that they present a true and fair view. So, from a personal point of view, regardless of whether there's an external audit process or not, I go through a number of checks, controls and balances right the way through the process so that I'm assured when I sign off that I'm putting my name to it as a personal individual, that as far as I'm concerned they represent the correct representation of in accordance with the relevant standards and have been presented correctly. So at that point it's my expectation that the external audit process won't throw up anything that's fundamental. Very often they identify issues, errors, but I wouldn't expect to find fundamental weaknesses in those statements. I do, however, agree that it's an important external validation. It is required to give the public at large the confidence that that is the case, and it's really disappointing that we are in the place where we are with the external audit market.
Just to follow up on that, should the external auditors then give us a refund of any fees that they have charged, or haven't we paid them for the years they haven't done it in any case?
Yeah, so we only pay them for the work that's carried out. So although there's a fee, fee for service that's agreed with PSAA as it is these days, we would only actually pay that if they carried out the work they were contracted to do. So if, for example, the audits don't take place for 21-22, there is some work going on, and they're focusing on the best value judgment, which again sort of plays back to the previous question about the duty for best value. If that was the only work they would undertake, we would expect to see a reduction in fees, and similar for 22-23 as well.
Yeah. Just before I let in Councillor Osborne with his points, I guess just to pick up on what Councillor Sands has said there, is that this report and some of the work that's undertaken by this council over the last years has shown there's been a lot more checks and balances going in place with procedure, a lot more reporting back, and a lot more ownership of risk and different areas, which is to be commended and helps reduce risk and give us an assurance as a committee. I think that additional point about the fact that there's going to be less validation externally of our statements, has that been factored in at this end to consider any additional mitigations through our existing processes to make sure that that particular scenario doesn't transpire? So yeah.
I might help a little bit with this. For instance, when we look at something like the treatment of our loans to companies or treatments, we are automatically now much more ready to go to our treasury advisors. It means if we're at all unsure, the level of validation we'll seek from other parties is now significantly more likely to take place, because we just don't want to have any risk at all with this. Previously, we might discuss with the auditors, but if they're not going to respond quickly enough, we can't sign this thing off. It's more difficult to us. And of course, we are always concerned, because it's not just our basically how the public thinks about it, it's our partners in business and our suppliers and our customers. This is a degree of concern across the entire sector, and And businesses are concerned about us, not because they think we're doing a bad job, but because they can't get that sign off. It makes it more difficult for them too. So we are doing more validation strategies we can do. I mean, one thing the auditors did like for us this time around, we did extra checks to actually do the audit process ourselves. So they can't rely on it. We checked off all the payments, income and expenditure, everything over 160k into the accounts, every single thing, totality, census approach. That's a check they'll do. We did lots of checks on journals. All the approaches they're doing, we undertook during the basic period from June, July, August, September, and into October, because we just can't afford to have anything continue. Because our issue is, even if they disclaimed everything with 23-24, our opening balances, they need to rely on to sign off the accounts that time around. So we really need to be very, very, very certain. So we've upped our standards internally. So it isn't the best situation, but we decided the best way forward is to do a much more rigorous job on our own internal review. And that's the only option available to us, really, I think.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a prudent way forward. I appreciate that answer. Councillor Osborne at that point, Councillor.
Thanks. I've got two areas of questions. One on the interim, what's listed on page 229 is the letter of corporate leadership and over the amount of interim statutory officers, which you talked about, Gareth, a little bit, and one on Holly and Company. So on the interim, it would be helpful to know whether there's the fact that we've got such a high proportion of quite senior posts as interims, whether that's the case across other similar sized authorities, or whether Norwich is unusual in that regard. Or Gareth talked about this being taken seriously. It would be helpful, I think, to have a bit more detail on what's being done to try and address that.
In terms of addressing it, it's very simply, we have gone out, we have hired to the Section 151 position. They are figuring out how they've gone through the process for the deputy. I don't know the details on that item. Generally speaking, we're looking to put in place people to hire in the new year as well on some of the lower level positions. I mean, we tend to hire immediately. I think it's now the capital monitoring accountant. I believe we've hired to that post. So we're trying to fill in the place when we can. But to be honest, the market is difficult, to be quite frank. It's a part of the growing problem.
So what's led to us being in that position?
It's the market itself. Personal opinion, this is my personal opinion, I don't never might suggest himself, but I think the market itself is quite difficult. Norwich itself is a little bit more isolated. For a big district council, it's much more isolated. It's got a very ambitious agenda, and what basically people receive the pay. I don't recognise the fact that Norwich cost of living is lower than another place, but overall that does affect, particularly in finance.
So it's geography and pay.
Geography and pay, I think, is a part of it. You're not too close to London, it's simple.
Yeah, and is that reflected across other councils, or
There are other councils with very similar problems in terms of agency staff at the top. Norwich is lucky. We have been successful, in the better way of putting it, in getting hold of quality, capable interim staff at the top. A lot of councils have not been so successful, and I can honestly say I've worked with some incredibly talented agency staff in here, which I'm sure a lot of councils haven't been so lucky. This is a personal experience. I'm very lucky. I'm getting to have developed well with my boss. Being quite frank, that is a huge advantage to me. It's one of the reasons I decided to keep being around it. It matters to me a great deal, that development I get. So I'm taking a little bit less to get that development. But it is a very common problem across local government. It is huge pay problems in local government specifically, because you've got always much lower pay, relatively speaking, to the rest of the public sector on average, which in terms of finance staff, compared to the private sector, the wage disparity is quite big on the actual permanent side. So it's a huge problem, particularly in finance, planning, I think legal, social care. It's a big problem across the entire sector.
I'll just take Councillor Osborne's second point. Was
yeah, my second question on the Holly and Company. So we talked about the LGA peer review, which resulted in pushing local partnerships to take a review of the governance of the council's companies. I was wondering if it's possible for this committee to see that governance review.
Yeah,
It
so,
won't be other than the line item. That's
so
what I'm
you're
thinking.
saying the Council Commission local partnerships to undertake a review of the governance of the council's companies, paragraph 22. I was going to draw out the same point, yes. I would be minded as this committee to actually see the outcome of that report, to see that report. What's officers' opinions on us receiving that assurance?
Can I
And I do have a point.
in addition to that, so looking at the reason for in paragraph 21 of this report, looking at the lack of effective governance and institutional blindness to the escalating risk, that would be helpful, I think, is particularly in relation to NCSL, which I think, reading through this report and previous reports, it's clear that there is risk associated with that company. It would be helpful to see whether there is an escalating risk of that and what the options appraisal is for proceeding with, or how the council could approach the risk around that company.
Yeah, so the two questions are linked, aren't they? In that the local partnerships review is into the governance both of NCSL and Lion Homes. Certainly, I don't see a problem with the outcomes from that report being seen here. We need to make sure that it's done at the appropriate time, because that will be a reflection of the situation now, and you want to hear what the council's response is and what it's doing about it. So I think that's an entirely appropriate discussion to have in the round. There are a number of other areas where the performance of the companies are under review. So the shareholder panel is a really key place where that report will go, and where we would look initially for the shareholder panel to take stock of that and come up with some recommendations. So I think it's getting it in the right order, so that there's a chance to understand and develop the strategy for responding to it before the audit committee then has an opportunity to review those actions, whether they're the right actions. That would be the role of audit committee. I would
absolutely. Just to pick up, and then we'll take the point on paragraph 21, because incidentally those are the two paragraphs that I had pulled out as well. Yes, obviously we've got responsibility for governance arrangements around the company, so it would only be right. So I think we've got a note there that once the shareholder panel has had their chance to review and respond, then that would be the right time for it to start to come into the audit cycle. So if we could leave that as an open thing to do. We'll come back to point 21. I'll just let Councillor Kendrick in. I know we're still waiting.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just point out that Councillor Galpin has seen it. Who's a member of the shareholder panel.
Right.
Personally, I had no objection. I mean, it's not my decision, I have to say, but I read the report.
Yep.
I had no objection to members of the audit committee seeing it. I would suggest you just contact the monitoring officer and ask for a copy.
Yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll take it as an item here at the committee to be discussed, so that the committee can get the assurance around the governance arrangements. And obviously, Councillor Galvin, as a member of the shareholder panel, is not at liberty to share what is said in that shareholder panel. So no other member would know what was happening or said in those said meetings. And so this committee needs to find its assurance. Returning to your point on paragraph 21, let me just pick it up so I can understand it as well. The word standing out to me of institutional blindness was key. It's a phrase that makes sense once you've read it really for a first time. And so, from my perspective, and I'll see what Councillor Osborne was, it's to get that assurance around the decision we're making, that we're undertaking, isn't, as it said here, is that the company had to be a success, which led to effectively bad decision making. So we have two well-established companies, and they will be performing in variation comparative to themselves in the open market. How can we get assurance? This is my question. I don't know exactly what Councillor Osborne wants, but how do we get assurance that we are, not pushing for, we're not punting good money after bad, I guess, in some ways, and that we are institutionally blind to the problems. So how can we get that assurance?
So I think it's twofold. So the shareholder panel, again, is the body that and I think if you port across into the private sector, you wouldn't have an equivalent to the shareholder panel. So that's something that's fairly unique in this set of circumstances, and that just to remind us is a group of people who are representing the interests of the council as the sole shareholder. I think layered onto that, the role, the Section 151 officer role has a statutory oversight above all of the activities that impact on the council's finances. That would include both the aggregation of the companies into the council's group accounts, and also all of the financial transactions that go between. So that includes the contract between the council and the company, and relevant issues like the loans, so where loans are in place. And again, there's professional rules and regulations about under what circumstances you would lend to a company, and in that sense, the 151 would be wearing the hat that was in the council's best interest. So would set conditions that were appropriate for a company in operating the marketplace. So things like loan conditions and security and rates of repayment and call-in arrangements as well to protect the council's position. I think what you were seeing there in terms of this institutional blindness is, I think, as you described, there was a feeling that there was no other option other than to keep the company going. I think very clearly the work that's taken place with more recently. I wasn't around when NRL had some issues, so I can't speak about that. But more recently, when issues became apparent with NCSL, there was a whole range of options, including whether the company should continue. And again, professional advice on that was given about whether that was an option and what the alternatives would be. So I think those whole range of options were considered, and you would expect them to be considered as well.
No, I think that's fair. I'll let Councillor Osborne. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Is that okay in the public domain?
Public part of the meeting.
Yes.
But
Thank you. Sorry.
But so I guess just to reframe that slightly back, that you've demonstrated that there are procedures in place where we're following legislation or we're doing appraisal. But that still doesn't mean that a judgment call could be for driving to wind a business up or to keep a business going, is not driven by an underlying desire to do so. So how do we get assurance here that that's not happening, and beyond that? So put it another way. So how can you provide us more assurance at this committee that that's not the case, other than saying, well, we've gone through a certain amount of procedures, I guess.
So there's a whole range of stuff, isn't it? But I guess from my perspective, the bottom line is that I would, in the same way that Section 114 is one of the tools in my armoury, I would insist on a particular course of action if I was not satisfied that appropriate action was being taken, and therefore the council would be put at risk. And that's the lever you have with a wholly owned company. It's more difficult in other circumstances.
And when you talk about risk, it's not necessarily overall financial risk to a collapse of the council, which is a small arm like this wouldn't be able to do effectively, I imagine. But it's more that reputational risk.
That's part of it as well.
And how that's taken into account. But that's interesting. I would say that it would be interesting for this committee to get more assurance around decision-making process, or to understand what was considered at a certain time. I'll let Gareth in, and I'll let Jamie finish his point. Then it's Councillor Prinsley, followed by Councillor Packard. Then we'll start to move on. I'm sorry to go so long.
I think it might be useful if we go away and figure how we can provide that assurance, because part of the challenge is going, what can be shared in the public versus the exempt sections, for very good reasons. Because then there is a vigorous improvement in the governance and the performance of the of the companies, but we can't necessarily share that in the public domain.
No, sure.
And that's part of the challenge that we have here.
Yeah.
That's my only concern of answering the question so directly, because there are things we can share in the example sheets, it's easier. So if we go away and figure out how we come back with some kind of assurance, maybe a separate short meeting in the exemption reviews, it's not straightforward.
That's a good thought. I'm going to let Councillor Osborne in, but I'll just let the internal audit Teresa just come in as a direct point.
What I was going to suggest is that one of the things we need to do more of is assurance mapping.
Yeah.
And this could be one area where we look at where do you get sources of assurance from for some of the risks and things you're talking about.
Yeah.
And we map that out in some way for you.
Yes.
And then you might be able to see where the different levels of assurance come through.
Yeah.
Because there's probably some reporting lines that maybe go through the cabinet, board meetings.
Yeah.
We just need to see how they all flow together.
That
So
would
you see where it all
definitely
comes
help.
in. So that may be something Gareth and I and Neville can work on. And
Yeah,
get something
so
together.
we can get some assurance in coming months. Just let Councillor Osborne finish his point now on his points there.
We mentioned there's been essentially an options appraisal. I think it would be helpful for us to see that options appraisal, if that's possible. So I'd like to request that we get that along with the governance review. The other thing is when we get that governance review, it would be helpful when we get that governance review to get a report outlining what the council's role is and what the shareholder panel's role is and what the company's role is, because there is overlap, so Bob, as I understand, Bob Granville is at once interim head of housing, interim chief managing director of NCSL, and the director of NCSL. So this links back to that previous discussion about interims.
Yes.
But it would be helpful to have a bit more of an understanding, as well as that government review, of who manages the contracts, who writes the contracts, how does that feedback process work between the council, or in this case the client, and the contractor. How does the feedback process between them work on the contract?
And any kind of conflicts of interest, I guess.
Yeah. So the conflict of interest, it has been formally dealt with. So when Bob's operating as the managing director of NCSL, he's not in the contract negotiations. There's a separate contract manager. He's managing it from the company side, if you like. So he's wearing that particular hat, and lots of people wear lots of hats at different times. So Bob, when he's in interim managing director, is operating on behalf of the company, and Brian Burton and Andy Summers are the client side contract managers. So there's a very so Bob is not marking his own homework in that sense. And when he's on the housing side, he's wearing a different hat and is not making decisions that directly affect NCSL. So there is a conflict of interest that's being managed within the housing sector, with Bob holding those two roles.
I guess it would be good for us to be able to see how that is actually laid out, so we get that assurance. Again, that can be exempt from public if it's sensitive, but we can then get assurance. Not the final bits.
Yeah,
Also,
the
just
feedback
to be-
process between the client and the contractor on the contract.
Just to be really clear, Bob is only a director of the company by virtue of being the managing director. So, and that would be the same whether it was Bob or anyone else.
Yeah.
But if you're the managing director, then you are a director of the company.
So we've got a few action points for additional information to come back to committee, and if there's any ambiguity about the request, then feel free to email officers, direct copy me in, and we can make sure that that's hashed down and come back. Thank you for those great points. Councillor Princely is next. And was it Councillor Packard?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So this question that Jamie had about interims is not just a problem in the City Council. It's a problem across all of Norwich. And from the hospital, if I told you the number of locum consultants we had working, you'd be astonished. But that doesn't mean to say the locum consultants are not really effective. They're very effective. And I can see, having never been to this particular committee before, you're also very effective. And the fact is that this is a very successful council with a story to tell, which is what we heard from Councillor Kendrick. And I'm, I suppose, a little surprised that the great success of the financial management of this council is not widely known. I think if you were to ask the citizens of Norwich whether they felt that they had a city council that was behaving quite as well as this, so prudently, and in comparison to many other city councils and district councils around the country being a great success, I think that's a story that the city council should tell people.
No, thank you for those observations. If we can keep it to questions on the actual paper we can get through. I believe you may need to declare an interest as a director of Lion Homes for the minutes.
Okay.
There's just been discussion on the wholly owned companies.
Oh, right, yes, I am a director of Lion Homes as by virtue of having been appointed thus.
Yes, thank you for the points. And Councillor Packer, you're fine. Any other points on this item? No? Okay, well, we appreciate the officers putting this together. It's a timely, important report, particularly with the economic situation that councils find themselves in. We've got some positive action points to get some additional assurances around our highly owned companies, etc. And to get more information from that local partnerships review. So that's excellent. Thank you, committee, for that item. We will move straight on to what is framed as item. Just bear with me. Item which was item 5. We will now take as item 6, which is the draft annual government statement. Just handing it to Gareth now.
Right. Unfortunately, I don't have the knowledge and experience of a monitoring officer, so I will probably ask for comments back more generally, but I have no problems with a wide range of debate. And members have had an opportunity back in July to hear this report first. I don't hesitate to come back with comments and to have that discussion here, but it's unfortunately I can't answer quite as so directly to you.
That's what I need.
So,
without further ado, it might be easy to just move to comments, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. So just before I take comments, what I would say is obviously we had an opportunity to comment, and the monitoring officer was taken away. The copy in front of you digitally has track changes in it, so we've had an opportunity to see that. I'll take points from Councillor Osborne, and I will be inviting David to see if there's any points that he wishes to raise, just because of his vast experience in this area also. So, Councillor Osborne.
Thank you. When we talked about the SSL bit of it, which I think just want to note in there that the paragraph on NCSL in the report, I would like to see that expanded a bit. I think I said that at the previous audit committee meeting as well. Just trying to find the paragraph numbers so I'll find it. But so I'd like to see that expanded a bit more to give a bit more of the detail of the things we just discussed. You know, what the arrangement is for avoiding conflict of interest between NCSL and the council, what the feedback mechanisms are for the management of the contract. So that's actually paragraph numbers for page 30. The other question that I had is also on page 30 at the top. It says that the Housing Ombudsman has not upheld any complaints about the council during the year. My understanding, having just looked at the Ombudsman report for 22-23, is that there was 100% maladministration rate. So I'd like to understand what is that referring to the same thing?
Yeah. So could you just repeat that bit? So I didn't catch for you.
So the Housing Ombudsman's report on Norwich City Council found that there's a 100% maladministration rate in relation to the complaints that it had received. So any complaints that it had received, all of them it found that there was maladministration on the part of the council. So I'd like to query that statement that the Housing Ombudsman has not upheld any complaints about the council during the year. Throughout the report, there is reference to complaints and a new complaints procedure that was introduced in October 2022. I'd like to know for audit how we're getting the assurance that is effective. What's the metrics for that? What's the performance indication of how that new complaints process is working? And also in the report it talks about the legislation that will require the social housing regulation bill. I'd like to know how we're prepared for legal action over mould and damp cases and complaints about those.
One thing to note here is, unfortunately, this is a AGS for 22-23.
Yeah.
So that's the only thing I'll caveat it. We can answer these questions. I'll come back to you.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they may not relation to the AGS.
Yeah.
They might relation to next year's AGS. This is the challenge of having the auditors not audit the thing. This is part of the issue. We should close off months ago.
My understanding is that the Housing Ombudsman report is for 2022-23. So that's why I'm
No, I appreciate that. So I'll clarify that.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if that's related to 21-22. Sometimes what happens is by the time they get around to responding on it, it's a previous year. It's related to the previous year. But I'll come back to that item.
I think they're good points. I think Gareth has made a note of them.
I'll come back to
If Gareth, if you send me an email to Councillor Osborne, copying me in to
confirm everything.
Confirm that we've
all
got
the
right
questions I'd like to confirm, so to go back across the authority and come back to you full detailed answers because you deserve it. And even if it's tangential to the AGS, we'll still try and come back to the direct answer which you've requested here.
Yeah, and I would like a bit more detail in here on what assurance there is around the complaints process and how that's being managed to effective.
Yeah, that was a good point. And obviously Leah will be involved in that conversation.
Yes, there's a catch up here. Everything will be the full way loop. You, me, Leah, myself, and Fred Sales will inviting chatting to the
if any other members of the committee are interested in the outcomes of that dialogue, just let us know now or at the end of the meeting. We'll make sure you're copied in Councillor Sands as well, please.
Complaints got new KPIs which have been put through to cabinet. We've discussed this week.
Okay. Thank you for your points, Councillor Osborne. Are there any other points from committee members? And I don't mean to put David on the spot at all, but I know that this is an area that you've got a lot of experience in, and obviously this is a slightly new format this year. So I'm not seeing anyone indicating at the moment, but I was just wondering if you had any general comments, David.
Please, that's okay.
Yes, please.
Please, thank you. The first one is a very trivial point. On the covering page, can we just have the year for the AGS, please? Because that would be quite helpful. I'll come back and look at it in 3 or 4 years' time to realise what year it relates to, 22-23. So, again, just on Appendix A on page 35, because obviously the AGS should be updated for significant after-year events, which in fact comes back to potentially the questions that have just been asked about what's happening at A, B or C. But just have that on Appendix A, there's no text changes, presumably to the AGS that we received previously. So have there been no updates in the end column, where we got in progress or completed, for example? Because is this still the position that was presented to us when we got the document last time round? Because if it is, I think we'd certainly like to see an update on some of those things.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because the issue is, of course, that anything that we've agreed as an action is an action because it's fallen out of something that we consider to be significant. And the issue here is that we've got quite a number of actions that haven't been completed that are now well past their implementation date. So I think that's something that needs to be updated and reflected. Even if there's been no progress, I think we should be told there's been no progress from the last time it was sold.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, David. Thank you.
It might be used as a full-blown paper. Might be coming back to this thing in January with a full-blown paper of where we stand, a full update of the specific section or the updates.
I'm presuming it will come back again when the accounts.
I would like to say we'll come to it before then. We'd like to achieve results from these things of that date. But some of them I know are actually in train, and so I'm hoping 1 or 2 of them get closed off before that. So the accounts definitely has to come back, but I'll look at that specific item too, because
Okay, and then again on page 36. The top right hand update box, participation strategy. It talks about the corporate plan being refreshed, but there's no reference to a corporate plan refresh in the actual text of the AGS itself, or certainly nothing that I can see.
It's dated 23-24. This is from the. This is there's a corporate plan refresh taking place for.
That's happening in this cycle.
It's happening 23-24. So.
Yeah, so it should get picked up in the next statement.
Yeah.
That's fine. In which case, then, can we just have some dates around whatever's going to happen around the corporate plan refresh, if that's okay.
Yes, it's, I'm trying to find where the item you're referring to is. Sorry about that. But the corporate plan refresh is basically consultations taking place now, which is finished, and basically
Public consultation was at the end of November.
yeah, so end of November, and then we're doing some work in the new year. We're tying up to the budget itself, the infrastructure plan, and a final corporate plan sheet with all the adjustments. We presented it February, but it will still be we'll still be implementing aspects of that into June, July, because it's a really full-blown approach this year. We should really transform how we operate as an organisation. So it might be worth a bit more reference in this report.
Yeah, so just a little reference of the direction of travel across the next cycle to the cycle we're in.
Yeah.
And then again, it can get picked up in the next one as well. I'll just pause there, see if David has any more, but I know that Councillor Osborne would like to come in. So
I've got two more.
Okay, I'll take David's points in full. Thank you, David.
On 37, page 37, the bottom box is about corporate performance measures. And I don't think it's about the AGS, but it's just something that when I was reading it, just sort of made me realise that when the new corporate plan was adopted, why at the same time weren't key performance measures introduced? So why did you not have both documents running at the same time? You don't have to answer that, but it's just a question that came to mind, that you produced a new corporate plan that showed some performance measures at the same time, but that's just a by the by.
No, I think the thing is, for the new corporate plan, we are doing exactly that. I can't answer to why it didn't happen 2 years ago, but certainly for the new corporate plan, looking at the KPIs and looking at those things in the line are being done. And I can't answer what future officers did or didn't do. I'll be honest, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. One final point, activity in general, I suppose, is that if actions haven't been introduced, as these are for another time, do committee have a view about requesting officers to attend and tell us why not?
Well, I think I'd come back initially. We've got the internal audit report coming up shortly, and there are a number of outstanding points. Now, I know that Gareth has been working diligently behind the scenes to address those outstanding points, and it's been a concern of this committee for a number of meetings. We have highlighted that. I have taken the softly approach to work with the organisation in order to help get those tied off, which is ultimately the aim, is to get those tied off. I think perhaps we could pick that question up again, if that sounds all right, when we get to the internal audit report and see how the committee is minded to act in light of what Gareth would say at that point. If that's okay.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you. I'll let Councillor Osborne in.
Yeah, just to pick up, so they highlighted the first part A, the housing compliance. So I understand that this should now be completed. So this, because this is 2020, this is from last year, so this should now be completed. Is that right?
Sorry, I couldn't do. Apologies, I didn't know.
So the first line there, the housing compliance implementation of the housing compliance improvement plan.
Which page is that, sorry?
Sorry, page 35.
35.
I honestly do not know the answer to that statement. So I'm going to look into it.
So especially like what we just talked about before about social housing regulation bill, the level of complaints of the ombudsman's report, etc., as well as the fact that I think that the interim head of safety and compliance is leaving soon and will be replaced. So I'd like to have a bit of assurance of how the improvements that have been put in place will be maintained, including under a changed policy, the regulatory landscape.
Again, that's a question which might give some assurance, and then there's a wider question of, is that something that should be in the AGS, or is that more a point that's been drawn out from studying the paper? So I think come back to the council on that again.
I'm very happy. We'll have a conversation. We'll get all the questions. I just think you need to have a proper update on the tracker. So I'll sit down with Amalia and see if we can move to that. Unfortunately, she is, and we'll try and pick all that up.
Yeah. I'll take any of the points from the committee in a moment. What I would say is obviously this is, first of all, I appreciate the work that the monitoring officer has done with the report. It's a refresh of the report. Excuse my ignorance, but the reality is in previous AGSs we often talked about risks that we were identifying in the next cycle, and in here it doesn't seem to be clear to me that we really have that section anymore. So I was wondering where that is here, or why that's not happening.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, a lot of AGS aren't forward-looking AGSs about the governance, how strong the governance is in the council, how the council manager governs. But looking forward, I'll see if she thinks it's appropriate to bring it out. I do not know the answer to that question.
No, that's great. If you could copy that in, I mean, I think that's beneficial to be letting the public know how the council is forward-thinking about these issues, and gives both us as a committee and wider public assurance about the direction of travel for the council. So I think it is a valid element of the AGS, and so I'll be interested to see the response from the monitoring officer. David?
If I may, Chair, can I say again, following Councillor Quinton's question about the good work of Norwich, I don't know if I've made reference to the committee previously, but if the council doesn't produce an annual report, at which things like forward-facing risks would be included, in my view, rather than the AGS, and I think it probably should do. And I think many local authorities should produce reports to the public at large about the good work they do, because it's not realised. I don't think the public realise just what a good job local authorities do. So.
Well, I mean, it could be put as a recommendation. I'm not sure if David's allowed to make recommendations, but it could be a recommendation from members that we ask Cabinet to consider to put out an annual report of the work of the council to the public. If any member wanted to propose that would be something we could propose now. So I'll leave that in the air. Councillor Osborne?
I guess it would be interesting to see how that works, the tenant engagement, or not tenant engagement, the participation and communication strategy, because that ideally I would imagine that would form part of that wider participation and communication strategy. It wouldn't just be putting out a report and these things done, but it's inviting participation.
So it could be a recommendation potentially from this committee that's looked at through that strategy. Yeah. Obviously, we'd need a proposer and a seconder if there were any recommendations for that. So, Councillor Osborne is proposing. What's your wording there, roughly?
As part of the participation strategy and communication strategy, it's considered that, what was the wording that you used? Report on?
An annual report.
An annual report. Essentially an annual report.
Yeah. Yeah, and is there a seconder for that?
I can second it, but what I'd like to say is that obviously an organisation that is the size of Norwich City Council, with the number of employees it has, and the number of very interested people that there are, who are hundreds of thousands of Norwich citizens, there should be a report of what the council, not a sort of statement of political intent, but an actual report about what the council has done in the year, what it's achieved and what it hopes to do. And that would be a completely reasonable thing to do. If we were a large company, the shareholders of the company would expect the directors of the company and the chairman to produce a report about what had happened in the year. And such a document should exist, I believe.
Before we take the seconder on the proposal, I'll just let Gareth in.
I'm just wondering, we're doing the corporate plan. If each year tied to the corporate plan is actually what was achieved against the corporate plan and the bigger wide objectives, it would be one complete narrative. The corporate plan is forward-looking over the next 5 years, but it's also what you've done every year, what you achieved every year. So we actually don't have a statement of what we've done against the corporate plan, and those should be the big things we're doing. Should be what we're talking about, those big achievements.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so we have a proposal on the table. After hearing Gareth, are we keeping the proposal as it was, just to send it to the comms strategy for consideration?
Yeah. But to me, it makes sense to make it part of that participation communication strategy.
Okay, and we're seeing that as sort of good governance and transparency with the public, and that's why the remit of this committee is putting that forward.
Yeah.
Do we have a seconder for that? I'll second that for you, councillor. Okay, so on that basis, voting members.
So what was Councillor Prinsley's second?
Were you seconding?
I'm not, I thought I was.
No, you're welcome to. You're welcome to.
What I'd like
I was
to
just
see.
confirming
I'm all
the
I
word.
thought what Jamie was saying is that we would have a report, but you can second it as well.
No, you do. You do. Okay, well, we've got a proposal and a seconder, which is Councillor Prinsley. All those in favour that we recommend that to the Coms that we produce that report
via cabinet, I suppose.
Well, to the strategy, which would then go to cabinet, I assume. So that's unanimous from the committee. Thank you for that. Mindful of time, we've had good debate on both items. Are we happy with the questions outstanding to endorse the AGS as is with questions outstanding?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Which are going to be provided outside the meeting, so we can pass them on to the for consideration by the
Absolutely.
monitoring officer.
Absolutely, and we've got indications of those questions to go to ourselves and Councillor Sands, which you can circulate to other members if they show an interest. Okay, thank you. So we move on to the next item, which is the draft statement of accounts. Gareth will introduce. Again, it's something we've had come before. We've had a bit of training on it. We do a bit of annual training refreshing, which we very much appreciate the support of officers for. I'll hand over to Gareth and then we'll take points on this item. Thank you.
As you know, we've had the overall arching training. Broadly speaking, I think the most important thing to note about the accounts is overall the council's basically net equity is a significant increase on a year-by-year basis. A lot of councils are in such a situation. The financial account, broadly speaking, if you go to the balance sheet, I'm just going to scroll through it very quickly. It's not going as quickly as I thought. 1 second. The net equity of the councils have grown by just close to £200 million between the 2 years. This is a fundamentally good thing. It's driven by, as we noted previously during the training session, primarily by the property, plant and equipment and basically the long-term assets. It's worth noting, of course, that basically between the 2 years that we've seen a significant drop in borrowing overall as well. Because this is the story of the council. The borrowing is going down, the assets are going up. We're being very prudent, sustainable, and this is tied to being very careful about our capital expenditure as well. And that's why we're putting in place that capital board and turning the accounts to really make sure we get the benefits out of the process. Overall, this is simply a story of a frugal council. We delivered to May 31st deadline, and it's worth noting. Go back to the original statement, so I don't spend too much time on this thing, because it's more questions you ask. That the audit is not going to be delivered anytime soon. 22-23, we are getting audit questions, but unfortunately, they're waiting on clarity from central government right now. They want to know, are they going to disclaim things? Can we move on to 23-24? Because they're already setting up to do the 23-24 accounts, and they're ready, good to go. So as much challenge as we may get frustrated with our external audit colleagues, and we do, quite frankly, there's issue resources in the sector. My biggest concern is we actually get clarity from central government as soon as possible, so we can move forward and actually get the make sure 23-24 accounts get back onto the right track, because it's a huge issue for the public taxpayer that we can actually get. We have a good relationship with our customers and suppliers, so we can deliver things that Norwich wants. This is a very strong set of balance sheet for a district council. Most district councils do not have balance sheets with over £1 billion of assets. We do have a very healthy level of reserves as well, and we intend to retain those things. And that's been the Norwich tradition, prudent, sustainable finances, both in terms of the reserves and also in terms of the management accounting, generally speaking. So please do not hesitate to ask questions. There are lots of exciting things getting in the accounts. They are the accounts after all. And obviously, a dream that you think of them all the time, but I accept that you might not.
I can see Councillor Sands is jumping at the bit.
Oh, absolutely.
By Councillor Osborne.
The question of pooling in the capital programme I find sort of somewhat interesting, because it talks about, on the bottom of page 54, Norfolk came together to produce a pooling memorandum which gives 1/3 county 1/3 shared equally to districts and 1/3 based on growth of the top slice to the county, which I find a bit suspicious. And it talks about the fact that we still don't have a fair funding formula from central government, but also then in the middle of page 55, it says the council belongs to the pool as it still benefits from it, but gets less than what a fairer system would provide. So what are then the benefits of belonging to this pool? Because it doesn't seem to be very many to me. And can the council opt out of it?
We can opt out of it straight off the bat. The benefits are very simple. We have a levy because we are an authority which generates more income than we require. We are assessed a tariff, and beyond that, because we grow even beyond the tariff arrangement, we get a levy. And that levy is all the districts get a levy, but individually we have to hit it up to central government. So what we're doing really is because as a collective pool, we have a county, and it's a giant top-up authority. So collectively, what happens is we don't generate as much money as we would require collectively. But individually, districts, we generate more. So what's happening, we're taking the benefit of actually the losses of the county to make sure that we can get advantages to the actual benefit of the levy. So it's simple terms. I'll try and find you the actual evidence in money. If you go to page 54,
yeah,
you'll see two key figures here. You're going to see individually Breckland in top tariff top-up position. Breckland, Broadland, all the way through to Norfolk County Council. You notice everyone's in red? Yeah. That's all the districts.
And there's
county. Their losses are our benefit. It means overall we're in a loss position, and therefore the figure of 327.90, which is what basically our levy payment would be to central government, we don't get to pay. Now some of our other partners have even more money, roughly speaking. Now we may be generating huge amounts of business rates, but actually we don't get to retain that much. But if we all pool our monies, we get to a grand total of £8.5 million in 22-23, and we get our share of that. And last year that's worth £464,000. That's money we're not relying on a base budget, but means we can spend more money on things that Norwich wants. But you're quite right, a fairer system, we wouldn't be in this situation because we do generate large amounts of business rates. Unfortunately, business rates is reducing. On the other hand, we still produce about £96 million overall, roughly speaking, between that and Section 31 grants. Now, Section 31 grants are when government gives us money, broadly speaking, because it's giving out discounts to businesses. But it wasn't for those we produced £96 million in Norwich, the district. Now those monies are retained by us. So the more we can generate out of it, the better we are. Unfortunately, because the funding form is so out of date, it's now 12 years out of date in practicality. It means we've had lots of growth in population, lots of social need, but that's not reflected in the amount of money we get to keep. If we had a fairer situation, because we have a fair amount of deprivation in the borough, we'd be able to retain more, we'd be able to look after those people more. Unfortunately, the funding formula is very old and it's becoming increasingly problematic. The government's doing lots of wheezes to get around the problem. For instance, I was in Borough, Enfield, which got about £10–12 million worth of housing grant simply because of failures in the funding formula. This is increasing across the system. Government needs to rebase this as soon as possible, but it's politically very challenging to do because there's always winners, there's always losers. But Norwich in particular would be a winner of rebasing in all likelihood because it's a city where there's deprivation with more population, whereas some rural areas, or rural areas, but certainly some places with richer places, they wouldn't necessarily need as much overall, but they might be generating more business rates than they need.
That I think sounds like a prudent way forward to pull together and to keep more of that money in the city. So thank you for that explanation. I think that answered Councillor Sand's point.
I'm not sure I fully understand it. I think what it boils down to is Norwich remains the powerhouse for the whole Norfolk economy, in essence. I think that's what you're saying.
A very large portion of the powerhouse. The problem is the rates do not necessarily go where the need is, where Norwich is, and at some of our neighbours, and that's unfortunate. but because we pulled together, we're able to get hold of some of those resources that would otherwise go to central government. And that's why we do it. It might be the best situation, but it's better than, a lot better than nothing. We can spend the money that we don't have to give central government.
Brilliant.
Perhaps we should secede from the union.
Independence from Norfolk. Is that the proposal that's on the table? Councillor Osborne, do you want to come in with your point?
You want to second that?
It's ultra vires, Chair.
Yes, sorry. Let's pick up a couple of points. There's a point about on page 62.
Yep.
That refers to there will be specific service-specific and cross-cutting reviews of themes, including the digital council, blah, 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 and including contract management. I'm aware that contract management is something that the audit looked at before I was on the committee, but I'd like to know a bit more about which contracts being reviewed, what that process is involved, and what the results of that is. For example, on page 68, it says we've reviewed our contract with NCSL to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our street cleaning, including litter collection, fly tipping, and litter bin emptying. From casework, I know that that's a big issue in particular parts of the city. So we're interested to know how that contract has been reviewed.
Can I come in at that point and say that I think contract management is continuously under review, and we've looked as a council at the big contracts first. That's kind of how we started. I think so. But please explain more in a moment, Gareth. But also, I would add that the previous audit reports, any member of the council can request to see those audit reports. So if you're specifically requesting from officers to see those reports, please do so.
Available on the website, but I can find them if any member wishes to see previous reports. I'm happy to provide them for
I guess I'm looking for what because this is referring to there will be reviews of improving contract management. So I'm looking to see what that will be looking to improve. I'm not sure if there is that will.
I believe, Tracy, this one that I didn't actually write, and Ned might point out the answer better than me, but there were significant ranges of contract reviews every year, obviously. If a contract reviewed for savings and a rebate was obtained, it should be in the Q2 report, and it generated savings for the council because we have had a longer term, contract, so we require savings out of them. On NCSL, I do not know the ins and outs details, to be quite frank, I don't know. I can look into that with regard to NCSL specifically for you, but I don't know the answer, I really don't, sorry.
That's one of the contracts more significant contracts, so I'd be interested to know how that's being used, what that service review.
Well, there are savings in the medium-term financial plan that take place, and during that part, that what they're doing right now, broadly speaking, is trying to transform the organisation NCSL to become more efficient and effective and deliver more high value for money. And as part of the process, and that is the internal processes, but for us it's the contract and making sure we generate savings over the next 3-4 years. So for the next 3 years, there are savings of £1 million with NCSL they have to deliver. I'm not directly tied into the contract management of NCSL, so I wouldn't be able to answer the question to address this.
So NCSL has to make savings of
the contract in regard to street cleaning, all that area has to make £1 million over the next 3 years, as was approved back in about 2 years ago in the budget. So it's there. It's not about necessarily less. It's about basically becoming a more efficient organisation, and that came out of a report demonstrating you could do the same. Basically, you could due to volumes and more efficiencies, you could generate those savings. Unfortunately, I'm not really au fait with that, and I can go to the head of service to get more answers to that question. I don't know the details more than that.
That relates to my other question, which is about so in the comprehensive spending and income statement, group one, it refers to the NCSL's expenditure and income. But I understand that NCSL's profits go back to the council.
Yes, and losses,
and losses.
Yeah.
So I couldn't work out from that line in the.
Are you referring to group accounts?
Yeah. So I'm trying to work out.
And just for context, we have said at this committee before that really we would like to see more oversight of those contractual obligations and risks to this council, because the group accounts really don't encapsulate that for this committee's benefit.
The group accounts are probably not the way to get into that kind of conversation, unfortunately. Because the group accounts are, in civil terms, really aimed at accountants, being quite frank. That's why they're not necessarily very helpful from your point of view to understand it. So they would help, and basically someone doing financial analysis, understand the resilience of the overarching group, understand what are, for instance, what the group accounts are really there for, to make sure when we generate, when we spend with our own body over here, so this is we spend money with NCSL, and they then basically they generate income off us. We're not double counting the income and expenditure, because basically it's a net. They net off the transactions in real terms. So that's what the group accounts are there, to make sure we show the true position of the overarching council.
Yeah. So when you say that's the group statement isn't the best way of getting into that, what is the best way of getting into that?
In simple terms, this is where it's a question of, it's really about if you're looking at if you're on the company boards or you're part of the shareholder panel, that's probably an easier route in. But unfortunately, that is not. It's not very easy to go for it here, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't have the papers in front of me to go through what actually happens in companies.
No, and this is obviously a slightly different item. Yeah. But where does this committee get assurance about that information?
Yeah.
I think
that's what we need to think about in practical terms, how we do assurance for the companies.
Yeah.
Can we get a report from the shareholder panel, for example?
Could we consider that this comes back to the committee, so that we, that the officers, are charged with bringing us some information about how we can get the assurance? I'll let David in for a comment at this point with his experience.
What I'm going to say is that, can I suggest that outside the meeting, members of the committee decide what assurance we actually require from the management of the two companies? Because of course the questions that we've asked tonight have been very wide-ranging.
Yeah.
I think the issue really is about, is that something for audit committee?
Yeah.
Or is it something for the shareholder panel? Or is it something for open scrutiny? Where does it actually sit? So I think, my view would be rather keep back and forth questions to officers.
I'd rather go back to the monitoring officer.
I think the issue,
character matter.
Well, I think the issue maybe should be, what do we as a committee actually want assurance on with respect to the two companies? And once we've decided that, then there'd be a position, for example, about assurance mapping or whatever that we'd be able to obtain. Otherwise, to me, it seems though we could just get piecemeal drips of information when we like the totality of the picture presented all at once. So I certainly prefer that, but I don't know.
I think your assurance map will give you quite a lot of information if we do it well, and then you'll see if there are any assurance gaps, and then you can decide from looking at that map if there's something in particular you want, or you want audit to look at.
That sounds like a good starting point.
I think the insurance map will give you a good picture to start.
I think that's a good start.
Then you can ask your questions if you think there's a gap or something's not on here, and we go, okay, well that's a gap then.
So if we can take the assurance,
I think that would be a good picture.
Document matrix as an item for discussion with and the committee can make recommendations out of that about what the remit is. David,
Can I come back there?
Yes, of course.
Could we add that document before we consider next year's draft AGS?
I would agree in terms of time frame ahead of the draft AGS, so the meeting before.
So that when is that? Is it the January meeting or the March meeting?
The draft AGS shouldn't go. Draft AGS for 23-24 will probably be May or June.
June. We've got plenty of time to do it.
Committee officers just kind of giving us a little bit about that. But I think that sounds logical. Let Councillor Sands at this point.
I've got a couple of items, one on page 49 and then again on page 64, the two different items. On page 49 it talks about monetising assets. And for example, the council could choose to monetise its heritage assets, which we never do, we never sell them. But do we have a programme of perhaps using their heritage assets to derive income in some way? In other words, use their heritage assets as income generators.
They are reviewed as part of the we do have an asset strategy. They're viewed as part of basically the overarching basically how generating income across the council. I'm not sure we have a specific thing about heritage assets per se, but we certainly look at all our entire state how you can maximise income. For instance, we are going to be looking at how we can generate more income from the halls, for instance. We're doing works on those. Across the entire thing, we want to make sure that where we can maximise income and basically to ensure our assets are basically staying in a fit state of the heritage assets, or to offset basically to make sure you can keep affording all the things that we want to within the council's revenue budgets. So we do look at this across the piece. There's a 5-year plan taking root right now with regard to its assets overall. We're looking at investment assets right now, but it will go wide than that inevitably. So we're looking to what we should buy, sell, and basically invest in, where we should do rent reviews, when we should review leases, all that gets looked in around. So we do look to maximise our investment income at all points in time. So it's always looked at annually.
So, for example, on St Andrew's Hall, which I think put an organ in there, I know it's having some roof renovations and stuff done and other stuff, but when that's completed, would we be looking, for example, to run concerts or something in there?
We're looking, quite frankly, the council is looking to generate income wherever it can, as long as it's appropriate. So that sums it up, broadly speaking. We want to generate income where it's possible. But you also don't see on St Andrew's Hall, but on the halls, we're going to generate income of about 150k over from next year onwards. 10k, I think it's technically it's 139 and 10k, not sure exactly the split, but basically we'll generate money there, and we're generally speaking look to generate money where it's appropriate. That sums it up. It's not, because sometimes it isn't appropriate, and we do have to take that into account.
And on page 64, there's a tiny little statement in the middle of the second half of the page which says the council has relatively high levels of internal borrowing which will need to be externalised at some point to fund the capital financing requirement. I mean, if we externalise borrowings, doesn't that then mean any profits derived from repayments of those internal loans then go to outside bodies?
This is the government techno babble, to be quite honest with you. Basically, we're not going to go boring if we've got lots of reserves. That sums it up. And we've got about, roughly speaking, our internal borrowings, it says around about, I think, 110, 120 million pounds, roughly speaking. This is money because we have reserves, cash reserves. We don't go and borrow for it. But unfortunately, as our reserves go down, as we start actually delivering on the capital programme, as we start using for other purposes, unfortunately, what it means is we then need to go and borrow off the markets, or PWLB, Public Works Funds Board, most likely scenario, and that would mean there is a cost. So what it's really saying is, just as the borrowing is £207 million right now, if the capital programme continues and basically we start as delivery takes place and resources are used, which are on our balance sheet already, it means we have to go and borrow significantly gradually over a period of time. But the council has a treasury management programme, treasury management board that looks at this and looks at it in great detail to make sure we're not borrowing inappropriately. So the overarching framework is good. It's just a question of right now, we seem to be able not to need to borrow, and we prefer not to.
Yeah, because of the high rate.
Does that then impose anything on the risk register?
There are risks, and you'll note the fact, basically higher up, we're looking at the timing of borrowing regarding 2 large loans of £50 million, and we're looking to basically, Robert the other day would have been discussing about how we're looking to manage those loans because they are relatively low rates. We're looking how we're going to either refinance those things or let them be extinguished, one way or the other, and how gradually we can make sure that we pay little cost overall. So you need to look at, when you look at cash flow, you need to look at it as investment income, one side of the fence, investments, and the other side of the fence, borrowing. Overall, we're looking to get the best net revenue position, no matter which way it works. And we're just not looking to borrow excessively, and particularly interest rates around about 5%. We're not looking to borrow right now if we can. We don't need to. We've got large cash supplies. We're making a significant investment income at this point in time. And as they go, broadly speaking, go down, by I think 25, 26, we potentially have to refinance, but it might be a situation point in time, it might be really cheap. We might actually borrow to cover the future loan. It's all going to be very, very much about the market showing, what the advice is, what the Treasury Management Strategy report, which we're going to the next, not this year, but the following year, will influence decisions on how we go about the borrowing. And so that's going to go via the Treasury Management Board. I hope that answers the question.
And just to pick up, so you'll see in the papers here, that we've got two large £50 million loans that are maturing, one in March 26 and one in March 28. And you can see the rates that are set out by Link Assets for the expected rate drop over time. And these keep seeming to get pushed out longer and longer. So there'll be a judgment point about whether or not the council refinances those in full or in part, and when they do so, so these are fairly significant. What's important from the Treasury Management Committee perspective is that the setting of the policy, we've not really had an opportunity to do that in this cycle for the next cycle, and I made that point at committee yesterday, but that if members are interested in the Treasury Management policy that underpins that, this is the time to start sending that information to Robert to help him construct that policy moving forward, because we all have a responsibility to agree the Treasury Management. We all sign our names to it, and if we want that policy to reflect this council in the best way, we need to input on that, and I'll be pushing for that next year. Any other points? I'm very wary of time. We've had around 35 minutes. Yeah. So subject to the points made, I think that the council would, this committee would like to thank officers for the diligent work around the statement of accounts, getting them completed on time, and we have every confidence, based upon our previous history with the auditing by external auditors, that these will be a sound recordings of our financial cycle. So thanks to officers for that, and we will close that item. Oh, sorry, well, we won't close that item because about 10 minutes ago, Councillor Kidman did indicate, I completely forgot, so we will not close that, and I apologise, Councillor.
That's okay, just very simple questions. Going back to page 49 and the point that Councillor Sands raised about the monetising heritage assets and income derivation. I see that there appear to be some rules about what you can then do with any profit. Say, for instance, the hall generate 150 or so. It looks like you can't fund revenue with that. It has to be put towards capital. Capital.
They're very tight regulations. Mm-hmm. Capital charges can't basically affect the taxpayer or the ratepayer. Equally speaking, capital income can't benefit the taxpayer or the ratepayer. It's put in place because that's not how local law works. We focus on the borrowing. Can you afford the borrowing? And that's why we keep talking about minimum revenue provision charges. They're really the way the councils basically need to operate prudently. And central government back in Margaret Thatcher, as you continue with Tony Blair onwards, they've been very concerned that councils operate and focus on the revenue side of things, and they focus on they can afford the borrowing. It's prudent, sustainable, affordable. So regardless of the political party, that's been the focus, and that's where the regulations prevent us from using it. There are little wriggles. So occasionally, if you do transformation, you can basically state you're going to do that and put a note it. You can spend £2 million capital streets, but it has to be towards transformational activities. Generally speaking, this council is not very keen on those wrinkles and doesn't tend to use them. There are ways around the regulations, but generally speaking, it's problematic. But we don't want to run these councils, and we do have the resources, but that's funded by revenue where we possibly can. But we do allow ourselves the flexibility on occasion.
And I think the committee would note that the council, looking closely at its assets, working out the true value, trying to realise more value from them, and to shed assets that, if not historically important and significant to the city, to shed them in terms of reducing our liability is a prudent way forward. And so we appreciate the work that the council has done in that area. Long overdue, but done at last. So that we should minimise risks moving forward. Any other points on the statement of accounts? No, that's brilliant. So we'll take that item and thank officers, as said earlier. So we'll yes, and just just to reiterate, when they are audited, if any of us are still councillors or alive at that point, it will actually come back to us then. So thank you for that. Let me just catch up where we are. So we've done the draft statement, and just to say, item 8 has been done, learning lessons from failings in other authorities. After the next item, we've still got the risk register, which we will do part under the line at the end of that item, and we have the work programme. So there's still quite a bit to do, but this is a fairly important item. It's item 7. It's the internal audit progress November 2023. So hand over to Teresa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just highlight a few things. I won't go into too much detail, so you get plenty of time to talk through the report and ask your questions. But this is our progress report for July to September. So section 2 on page 204, it tells you there that there's been no changes to the audit programme for this year so far. Progress against delivering our audit work. We've now done about 30% of the 23-24 plan, so this is for end of September. Maybe we'd like that to be closer to 50%, but work is ongoing, so everything's fine there. Going on to 4.4, further down, we've finalised 3 reports in the period. They all have reasonable assurance, but there is one, the Housing Benefits Report, that has an urgent recommendation, which is about the reconciliation between the housing benefit system and the general ledger system. You've got the executive summaries, which gives you more detail in Appendix 2. And then on the follow-up recommendations, we've got 49 that are outstanding, 3 are urgent, 29 are important, and you've got all the appendices 3, 4, 5 and 6, 7, which gives you all the detail. I'll take any questions and give you plenty of time now for your questions and discussion.
Thank you. So just throw it open to committee who's had the report. I think, shall we talk about any elements first, and then we'll come back to the outstanding points and how we feel about that. But any observations on the report you have? David, please.
Well, Teresa obviously raised in the introduction there the issue about no reconciliation of housing benefits in the general ledger since April 2022. So that's 20 months. What sort of resources are going to be required to undertake that reconciliation? And indeed, is it possible at this time to actually reconcile those 2 accounts?
Good question. Thank you, David. Well,
it's probably a management.
Yes.
I
was thinking, in practice, we think we have got a reconciliation at this point in time that works, but we need to validate that. And yes, it shouldn't take us so long, but this comes down to system implementation, and I'm a bit concerned about this. And generally speaking, we've got extra resource coming to the team recently, and one of the things we're going to look at is basically all the internal audit recommendations across the piece. And it's worth noting that some of the core that are not urgent ones actually delivered. Unfortunately, a bit of a breakdown in communication on the matter in the capital accounting one. But generally speaking, housing benefits, we're hopeful we've got a position. We're going to share it with internal audit. They can review it. And that is the approach. But generally speaking, across these parties, there's a whole range of reconciliations, but quite frankly, the quality hasn't been sufficient in the past, and they come to light over the last year, and so we've got some just arrived, and gradually speaking, as they get the accounts together, they show some extra capacity, and the extra capacity, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to focus on reconciliations.
Okay, thank you. Can I just come back on that then? If the reconciliation's been done, does that mean it's reconciled without any outstanding errors, or have you just got a balancing sum?
No, if they identified the errors at that point in time. I saw it about a month and a half ago. This is why I thought we'd actually responded to maybe the breakdown of communications point in time. I apologise, but I'm going to go back on that specific item. But I believe it was we reconciled it about a few £1,000s. I think there was one. There's one figure in between, but I don't think it was a huge difference. which is the closest we've got to it.
It doesn't matter what the size of the difference is, does it? If there's a difference, you don't
Yes,
have the debit and credit.
But the thing is, it's a correction. If you know what the corrections are, you're okay, and that's the difference. We knew what the corrections were. I think my big concern is this is one of a number of reconciliations overall, the entire piece, but quite frankly, I'm concerned the reconciliations weren't sufficient quality. That's my real concern. Basically, we've gone through an awful lot of them, and time and time again we found a way to do all the reconciliations, but they haven't been done for a significant period of time, and during in past years they won't be done either. So the question mark is this turned up as an issue, but it's been an issue for years, and that's my bigger concern.
Okay, can I just follow up on
yes.
that? That just brings another question up about, what shall I say, one-to-one discussions with staff, that managers have with staff. So somebody's obviously responsible for undertaking reconciliations. So I don't know, monthly, quarterly meetings between, for example, if I'm responsible for reconciliations, you're my manager, surely you'd be asking, have you done the reconciliation? Where is it? Why is it not reconciled? Why is it not? So it's like a separate issue that's not related to this. You don't have to provide an answer to that. I just raised it as a point about.
Kind of more general comment. One of the things we're really working on over the next year and a half is about financial control process across the entire thing. What we're working is also a financial calendar year, make sure reconciliations always taking place. And in the past, the reconciliations weren't always of quality I would have been happy with. And one thing that's happened through more recent processes and audits that's turned up. Particularly in the key controls audit, you mentioned that the challenges there. Those are the issues that turned up, and that's why in January and February we want to be closing those reconciliation issues down. But there may be more across the piece. We will work more systematically. The external auditors have reviewed all these areas before, and there isn't significant discrepancies. But I'm concerned that any of that is an issue. I'm very much every month, every quarter, we have a position whether it's a small reconciliation, like doing quarterly, and all the big reconciliations should go monthly. I'm concerned that somehow that got lost over a period of years. We're going through that process. We are seeing, we are fixing them. We've got a bank reconciliation I've reviewed. I'm happy with the bank reconciliation. There are other reconciliations we're reviewing and checking off. And generally speaking, we're not finding significant issues. But the big issue is they weren't being done. And that's my real concern.
So should that be encapsulated in the risk register somewhere? Because you've got reconciliations in this area, and if you've got an issue there, are there other areas of the council where there is reconciliation of data or money movement? Have those now been looked at because you've seen an inconsistency here? Should it be included in this particular type of issue? Should it be included in the risk register somewhere?
Moreover, it's about the level of risk you actually find in the process. Normally, I suppose this would be held within finance cost of piece, but the majority of the ones will be finance or HR or payroll, one way or the other. That's the majority of the reconciliations will sit there. As we've gone across the entire piece, we have managed to reconcile things, but unfortunately, it appears for a few years, the reconciliations weren't being done. I do not know when some of them started and weren't being done, and they weren't of sufficient quality. But generally speaking, we've gone through the process and gone through it for year end. They have been reconciled, but housing benefits turned up to be an issue in relation to a new system. And unfortunately, the new system was implemented, and that reconciliation has been too problematic since the beginning.
So Gareth, just to ask you a devil's advocate question, if you decided to leave tomorrow and everybody in those departments decided to leave tomorrow, what procedure is in place to make sure it didn't slip back into that? Where's the assurance that the problem won't happen again?
Well, that's exactly where Grotsman in to start going across the entire piece systematically, and why we want to have a complete financial control. So what we really want is a complete financial calendar of all activities should take place as and when and where, and who owns what, all the balance sheet, where all the notes produced them are. For instance, when Robert went to produce a bank reconciliation with the support of the Treasury team, that has now led to basically a new methodology statement. All those things need methodology statements and putting in place, and that is what we're trying to put the rigor back in place. And this, unfortunately, to be quite frank, this is a personal experience comment. It's right across local government today. Every single place we've gone in as an interim, or I've gone and moved jobs, the first thing I do is the quality of reconciliations is poor. Sometimes there's major problems, sometimes there isn't. In Norwich, so far, I haven't found major problems when we've eventually reconciled it. That's the good news. Systems were put together properly, so whatever happens, how it's people doing the transaction the same way means there's not issues. But unfortunately, That might be more chance than anything else, but I've not found any issues. If people tend to follow the same patterns, there tend not to be any issues in the reconciliations. So unfortunately, I'm generally broadly confident they're in a good place, not confident in the fact that work being done. So it's really not something very happy with, but that's why we've got individual staff who's looking into this gradually speaking as part of a workload to transform a process across the entire thing.
So would it be fair then to say that the committee should be seeking further assurance that those methodologies come into place? So
the key controls report itself will reflect that, because annually we look at these key controls. The thing is, what we need to make sure is across the entire piece, there's a programme of that improvement across the entire piece, and that's one of the things we want to take forward within finance, because it's having the annual year, if every single thing gets done at the same time. Budget monitoring happens, it means you reconcile the core debtors. Every single time you do things in a very systematic place. It's tick-tock. It's like the when you do piano, you've got the metronome. That's what reconciliation should be like. Metronomic. Every month, every quarter, every year, done the same way, perfected. And basically, internal audit, waft in, see, okay, don't even look at these ones are problematic, and they should see a heartbeat. And that's where we need to get to.
So because the committee have kind of identified that, when we get the key controls report, I think it's important that the concern of the committee is reflected in that report. And obviously that's a development, so I think that should be reflected as to a picture of where we stand when that report comes, and then there should be in the following cycle, which should be ample time really, another line in that following annual report that of key controls that shows that assurance has now been met as well, so that we can have that assurance.
Yes, generally speaking, they will make recommendations around has it been signed off, has it been produced monthly. Based on an awful lot of those requests coming through on the key controls reports, not only the ones you see, but all the detailed the tiny little requests and recommendations that we've been sorting out. But there's a whole bunch more which we need to really finalise by January, because they come back in January, the key controls, and they're going to review it in detail and probably look into new ones, quite frankly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as it's an issue now ongoing, let's keep that in our minds as those reports are produced around key controls. Thank you for that. Thank you for drawing that point out. I have to say, David, did you have a few more quick points on this?
Just one more, then.
Please.
The ones that are just on the action.
Yeah, please. No, David, just before we go on to actions, just because there are a lot of outstanding actions, and I think that will move us up. Is there any other comments from committee members? I'm not saying David, carry on.
Okay, thank you. And again, it's a question relating to the report we got at the July committee meeting.
Yeah.
And in there, the previous head of internal audit wrote that she'd concluded an investigation relating to 3 grants received by the council, and details of the recommendations will be provided to the committee once finalised. Obviously, that's not in this update report,
it is
so
not.
Could it please be included in the next one?
Yeah.
It might be that we all need to talk about that particular item, because it's so it is.
I don't recognise that one as, okay.
I do, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you for it's minuted. Thank you for drawing that out, David. Thank you. So I'll pick up here at a small point. You know, we have 49 outstanding recommendations at this point, and I think that I think it's fair to say that Gareth has given a lot of time and focus on this on behalf of the committee. I think at this point I'll invite Gareth to kind of give us a bit more of an indication of how he's finding progress, and then I'll invite the members for their comments.
Progress, to be honest, has been variable. To be fair, some of these, there was a breakdown in communications. Some of them should have new updates. For instance, the capital accounting and management, we have instituted a new capital board. There are draft terms of references. This is now moving to conclusion. What we have not done in this area, for instance, is put down new templates and modelling documents. So we're working on that. So what I'm going to propose is I will get hold of this entire list and go around all the heads of service and get a this back to you within 2 weeks. So it's 2 weeks, unfortunately, it's medium-term budget plan week.
Yes, no, don't worry, take your time.
No, I'll come back to you on this, because half of these were actually dealt with, and it's basically just unfortunate. I don't know how the breakdown has happened. Unfortunately, it's not really great for Teresa to walk into that challenging situation.
If these are not getting filtered back through, then that's an issue. David, come in, please.
Yeah, I'm personally happy with that response.
Yeah.
What I would like to see, please, is in the latest response column, can we have the date the response was provided to yourself to update? Because at the moment, certainly when I started looking at it, I thought, well, because that's why I had to go back to previous to see if it was the same response from last time, which is how I picked up the fact that we had a review by the end of the term audit about grants or whatever. So it'd be handy to have the date of the latest position, please.
We'll definitely try and do that, but we've got to make sure that people put that date in, because I don't think the system
does it.
Yes.
No, but ironically, in the Excel report we do, we actually keep the date, so we actually have the date.
So that would be helpful, because when I looked at the system, the dates it's got in there are like way back, and I think no, that's not. That doesn't. There must have been another update because the date has been revised.
Exactly.
So I know that. So either people aren't clicking that when they do it, or. But how we're going to do this? We're going to change this process between Gareth and the contractor and myself, because I can give Gareth access to the system, which means he can update directly, and we can have a new process whereby when he says it's implemented, then the auditor can go in and see the evidence, and then they can shut it down and go back to Gareth and say, no, I don't agree with it. So we're going to just redo that process and tighten it up a bit so that we can get some of these down and make sure that if they are implemented, they're closed off, and this report properly reflects that.
Exactly.
I think that's the problem with this one at the moment.
And so what sort of time frame do you have to smooth that system between yourselves? Because I'm minded to say, put a concerted effort in over the next 2 weeks. There's a lot of these outstanding. He's been putting a lot of effort in, and really, if there's no update provided to some of these, and it's not updated, we expect to see them at the next committee meeting. That's the reality. That's the default position I would like to take with the departments when you are feeding back now.
I'll be increasingly blunt already.
No,
so
but
I'll make sure that's
so
safe.
if I've not even processed the emails in touch, they're due here. They're due here at the next meeting. That's the default position now for those outstanding ones. If there's been no additional update, no movement, no response, I think we can accept that some things will move on, and we can judge that when we see the list, whether or not that's really adequately moved along when you circulate in a couple of weeks. But no response, they need to come and give an explanation at the next committee meeting. Okay, and let Councillor Wrighton at that point.
Yeah, it's just a quick point building on David's point about the latest response column, actually. And I think it'd be great to see a date when the response was received. I'd also like to see a date in the no response received column for the date that information was asked for from the department, so that we've got a full picture of how long people have had to respond and so on and so forth. So, thank you. Yeah,
I think that's a sensible way forward, and the officers accept that that's an important bit of information should be added.
It's more a question of how much we can put in the document than anything else. I agree with you saying, because we have had that issue in the past. I'm just not sure how we're going to change Tia's approach here.
Well, leave it with us. Let's see what we can do. And then let's see what we can give you next time and see if that helps. Because if a lot of these clear, it may not be much of an issue. But if some of these don't, then yes, you having a bit more information about we've asked for it on that date, they've had 6 weeks and they still haven't come back and they're not talking to us. I think that's fair enough.
I guess the point I'm making is if you've asked the day before the report went to
that's not fair.
It's not reasonable for us
they get a lot of time. They get reasonable time to do it. So they get reasonable time.
And then it gives us a clearer picture of how you're working at that end. Any more points on the David?
Sorry, just one final point. On page 217, there's reference to the safety audit, which you remember last time we had a discussion about this issue that had been raised was that there'd been no DBS checks undertaken. The comment column is that until audit carried out testing on the 24th of October. What did you find of the outcome of that testing, please? Was the position altered?
Okay, that's different.
I think that's going to be down to Hannah, who does the follow-up at TIA, so if they haven't updated the system and said that, then that's why we don't know that answer. So I think that's a failure in the process, really.
Well, that's been identified. Yeah. So can we square that failure off and also get that information back at some point?
Yes.
That can come as through email. That would be perfectly fine. But then also to make sure that weakness is identified as well, is dealt with, and just some assurance around that happening better in the future. I'm minded that we're coming up to the 2-hour point. We've got a few additional items. We'll look to close this one off, and then I'll seek the advice of the committee.
Just to recap then, so are you expecting the list of the updated actions in the next 2 weeks, or after a period of 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks?
Roughly 2 weeks from Gareth, and as we've said, if during that time and then for the next report, if we do not have any response, the default is that people will attend to give an explanation.
And then safeguarding.
And we will also take on an ad hoc basis what those responses are and whether or not we want them in anyway. Okay. What I just wanted to draw out just briefly is a notice from the antisocial behaviour, point 3 in the strategic findings. To measure the effectiveness of the revised policy and procedures, there is a need to develop KPIs and appropriate management information. So I look forward to seeing, I guess, that important outstanding finding to be squared off quickly. I would just also say, looking ahead, sorry, not at the outstanding ones, but there's next year's one, sorry. Sorry, this cycle, I mean, we've got a lot of important audits coming up, which you can't see here now for a moment, but no, I look, oh, here we go, yeah, so we've got, just to say, Q4, we've got waste management BIFA contracts to remind members. We've got also non-housing capital programme management that's coming in Q4, and corporate governance, and so I think these are all important areas to look at. In the current quarter, we've got environmental sustainability, and we've also got housing repairs and void management, NCSL. So those, I assume, will be coming to the next meeting. Procurement and contract management as well. These are all Q2. These are 3 big ones that I'm looking out for in Q2, which I think should also provide us some assurance. So I just want to make that clear. So is that coming to our next meeting, Teresa, those 3, if they're on time?
I can't promise that.
No,
because
fine.
Obviously the contractor has a lot of work to do, and we need to tidy them up so that we get 50% done at the end of September, not 30, if you see what I mean. So yes, I hope that where fieldwork is concluding, we get drafted. And I hope that the Q4 ones get started, but I suspect the Q4 reports may not make it until
the next cycle.
Yeah,
I
think so.
Yeah.
They are behind, and they seem fully staffed, but they are behind with where they are with the plan and several other people's. And yes, I'm trying to agree some new protocols and ways of working, which will kind of reset them and then start again, if you see what I mean, and get them back on track. And that isn't going to happen overnight.
No, okay.
It's going to be a few months to get there.
Yeah.
So yes.
That's good identification, and I'm pleased there's a roadmap forward. It gives me concern about the scoping for the audit plan in the next cycle, and it sounds that could be a reduced scope because there's a requirement to catch up, and I think that the committee would want to see that catch up happen without impacting the scope of next year. So we'll look closely at the audit plan, which will be coming in January, I assume. So
I think your next year's audit plan comes in March, not January.
Okay, big pardon.
Not January. So yes, and in the reset, it's possible that some of the Q4 may get moved.
Right. Okay. So that would be a second year where we postpone again.
Yeah, kind
of.
Okay,
that's 2. So that's 2 years in a row with the consortium. and postponements in both.
It's about whether they are confident that they can do them all.
Yeah, no.
And my worry is that, yes, it's a lot of work they've got to do. Have they got the resources to do it? Can they pull in more resources to get back up to speed? Or there's a bit of a risk assessment here that says what are the priority ones that we think need to be done, and which ones maybe could move and become next year's. Because there's no point having a reset and then being so far behind that they never catch up, and therefore we carry on like this. At some point you have to draw that line and say, okay, we maybe need to stop, say those ones need to be deferred, we want to do these ones, and get them into that position where they can reset. Otherwise we're just going to carry on like this and being all behind.
Okay, that's really concerning, to be entirely frank. And when I'm looking at things in quarter 3 and quarter 4, there are things like customer contact team, housing compliance that are in quarter 3, and then there are things like risk management and council tax, which can't be put off to the next cycle. And then we look at quarter 4, and then you've got key controls and assurance that can't be put off. Probably the accounts ones potentially can't be put off, but at the same time, as I've highlighted, the waste management BIFA, is the corporate governance, and the non-housing capital, I think, are really important ones, and we don't want to see any of these really slip. So it'll be interesting for you to present us what your contingency is for the final part of the cycle.
Let me see what they can do, because they're in a contract with us to deliver. They said they can deliver.
Yeah.
So if they're behind, they need to think what their contingency is.
Yeah.
Can they get more resources to deliver people's contracts? Because that's what they've signed up to do. So I need to have that difficult conversation with them.
No, okay, and I guess...
And see. The other thing I would say is that we need clients to also respond when they're asked for information, to deliver their responses on time, because some of the backlog is not just down to them, it's down to client as well.
Well, as the chair of audit, I would be happy to write on behalf of this committee, if the committee is minded for me to do so, and I'll take it on a show of hands in a minute, to contractors to remind them of responding quickly to and in good time to our requests, so that we don't hold up our audit process at this council. Are the committee minded for me to write to contractors in that way?
Is it contractors or clients?
Well, it's Gareth and his team, not just Gareth and his team, but it's officers.
Officers of the council.
Officers of the council.
Some places are, some areas are more responsive than others.
Okay.
So they do hold up sometimes, and I think this is why I want to have, we're calling it a protocol, but it's basically saying to everyone, there's 3 people in this relationship, we all have responsibilities and play a part in the process, and we all need to do things within certain timescales. So we're all going to get timescales to do things, and everyone has to do their part. And if the officers don't, or I don't, or the contractor doesn't do it, then there has to be some sort of consequences, which could be audits don't happen.
Yeah, well, we're not going to get in that position.
We've got to think about.
Let's be at this point where you're reconciling the rest of the audit plan. That ultimately, if we're seeing things of certain areas underperforming in their responses, that I want them to come here and explain that under performance, basically in response time.
And I think that will be easier to monitor when we get the new protocol in place with the timescales, because if someone doesn't do something, I will know, I'll have it recorded, I'll be able to say to you, right, that's not done because, or it's our fault, or it's the contractor.
Well, if you're finding that there is certain bottleneck in certain places, and it's going to have an impact on our audit cycle, that I would like to be informed of that, and I will then take action to speak on behalf of the committee, encouraging that particular bottleneck to clear, so that we can continue in good time.
Just a thought, would it help to have the senior officer involved where that bottleneck falls under, or the CEO if needs be, to
no, I think
an encouraging message.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could. I mean, or even cabinet member for resource could be the supporter of my request in that way to make sure that the audits aren't held up. Councillor Kendrick, would you be adverse to that? Could we consider trying to clear those bottlenecks together?
you can be in touch with me, and I'll try and do my best.
Yeah, no, okay, appreciate your support on that, Councillor. Okay, I think at that point, and we've had good deliberation, we can see a few warning lights ahead, and we've also got actions for officers to take forward so that we clear some of this, and we're now escalating our approach. I think we're doing the right way forward, and we thank officers, we thank Faye effectively for her last report. I assume this is Faye's work effectively.
Yeah.
And we're on record, thanks to Faye for her work on this, and we'll close this particular item. Now, we've been just over 2 hours, and I appreciate that members' dedication to audit. There's nothing quite like audit to keep the lights on in this building. We have items we can't postpone.
Sorry, Chair, whilst I do have dedication to audits, I've lost my childcare.
Yes,
So I'm going to have to make a move.
No, Councillor Packer, is absolutely fine. Life is life, and it comes first. So appreciate all the time that you've been here, and thank you for that time. We've got the risk register that might take a few minutes. I know there will be fatigue. Does the committee want a 5-minute rest, or do we want to continue through the last 2 items?
Can I just ask how much time longer do you think?
As long as it takes, Chair. As long as it takes. No, until the agenda is done. Until the agenda is done. I think we can wrap up in about 20 minutes to 30 minutes max.
Well, then I would like us to just continue.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. And if members have,
if you think it's another 2 hours, I think we should have.
No, well, it's 2 items. 2 items. I think we can wrap up in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. If members need to leave, the members need to leave. I'm sorry that the last meeting was cancelled. We could have maybe taken some of this business.
This is our sort of, this is not cancelled, it's postponed to this one, because we had a performance, didn't we?
That's right, okay. Maybe we need an extra meeting in the calendar on a permanent basis.
I keep putting an extra meeting.
Yeah, but maybe we need to do that. But we have to get through the business so this stuff can go to council. So we're carrying on. So we're moving on to the risk register. We will start the open part of this, and at the end we will take a closed section on the item below the line. So I'll move over to officers for the reports. Thank you.
So in practical terms, for the non-exempt section, there's been essentially no change. Quarter 1 saw significant movement, quarter 2 saw very little. The reality is most of the risks are very large. When they do move, they're quite significant. The one risk we thought we would actually reduce the risk of was regarding the nutrient neutrality one. Unfortunately, nothing happened. The government had an idea and it changed it. So it all got rid. So by the end of it, the risk register for the non-exempt section hasn't changed. There is a change in the exempt section. To be honest with you, this is a rare time, and I can honestly say it's been a very quiet period, speaking on this section.
Fine. Well, thank you for introducing the report. Obviously, I will reiterate that the below the line item on the risk register, please do not make reference to it in any way. We'll come to that. As the officer said, it's been a fairly steady and static period. Are there any comments on the report, on the figures in front of you? Any questions? Maybe we will wrap up quicker than expected. Councillor Sat.
Just on page 238.
Yep.
Number 15.
Yep.
Failure to draw down £50 million of housing infrastructure fund. Money previously secured from Homes England to assist with the delivery of Anglia Square. It's got static there, but there must be something happening somewhere.
Not in the. I'm aware of some things happening, and I can go into, and I can get you the details of them. Unfortunately, don't have it right in front of me. But broadly speaking, very little is. I think something's happening about right now. I'm not sure it's going to be talked about, so I don't know anything else.
There's a cabinet meeting next Wednesday.
Yes.
So that'll be coming up tomorrow at cabinet.
It's
next Wednesday.
Oh, it's tomorrow.
It's tomorrow.
Right. Yeah, next Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Yeah, sorry.
And that might answer that question for you.
Right. Okay.
But I'm unfortunately.
No. Well, the outcome of that meeting may well affect that score.
Yes.
And I think that's a fair point. Councillor Osborne.
Can I ask how that score's been identified?
That score's been. It might be useful if I bring you the risk management policies I've adopted. That I might explain the general scoring mechanism. So I'll get you a copy of that.
So it's likelihood times the
likelihood times impact.
But I guess I'm wondering how the likelihood
is calculated.
It's all to a certain extent. Well, it isn't an estimate. Broadly speaking, it's 1 through 5. I'm trying to think of the actual scoring because I actually produced it. But basically, a 5 would be a probable circumstance over 50%. I'll get you.
Yeah. And what's the mitigation for that risk?
Well, let me just pick this up at the moment. So this is the high-level top-line report.
Yes.
What we have had traditionally in the past would be the absolute breakdown of each area, even the below-the-line items, which would become below the line. That is where you've got the mitigations in place, identifying the issues, mitigations, etc., future actions. I was discussing before, but I would like those to come in full from now on for twice a year when they come.
The reason is because while I produced them for Cabinet for the last couple of times, they've not gone to Cabinet. I also do not know the reasons for it. It does get produced, it does get in all the detail. I do go through the top to the bottom. So when it comes then, it doesn't go there. There must be a reason for it. I do not know.
No.
It could be because it's exempt or confidential, but they should be able to go to this committee as underlying items as far as I'm concerned. I have no problems with that at all.
Well, let's get that. Let's get a clarity on that point.
Yeah.
The request is from the committee to have them in the full.
Yeah.
We didn't have them below the line unless there was commercial sensitivity.
Yeah.
So we would need a judgment on any that would be wanted to be taken below the line, I guess, from the section from Leah, from the monitoring officer in that respect. And we can have that conversation. But I think that would help flesh out the points you're looking at. But that's an action point to take away.
I can provide the actual backing document direct to you.
That's really helpful.
That's easier. It may have to treat all of them as exempt for the moment until we get clarity as to why it hasn't come. So I honestly do not know the reasons. It just doesn't.
So something like the climate change risk 21, risk the council, for instance. I don't see why that would be exempt. That's about mitigation that the council.
I don't know why. I also do not know why it is not being provided. I have produced it this last time. I'm not sure I actually did eventually. The last 2 times I produced it and didn't go through to Cabinet. There must have been a reason, I would assume, why I did not go through Cabinet, and therefore this time I don't believe I did the PDF thing, but I didn't go to Cabinet. I do not know. I really don't know.
That's fine. Well, irrespective of reasons why it didn't go to Cabinet,
we can provide.
We as a committee want to see it, and that's our request. And Cabinet members here, and if the Cabinet and the Cabinet member are happy for just top line at Cabinet, that's their decision. I would suggest that they would want the full thing as well, just to help remind new members of the Cabinet as well, etc. So, I mean, that's a recommendation that I put informally to Councillor Kendrick to make sure he's getting full information.
I am not sure it's the Cabinet member's decision. I think it just didn't. I don't know why it didn't.
No, but as a Cabinet member, he could request it at a Cabinet meeting the next time.
We don't know. I didn't have it.
Okay. But yeah, so that request is there, and we'll see that. Any other points about the risk register?
Well, it's quite hard to make points of it without seeing the
detail. Agreed. So we'll note that. Councillor Sand.
One time you think we've got an item in there from Exeter City Council, a series of points there, and number 21 to monitor the whistleblowing policy. I know we have a whistleblowing policy, but there's been some stuff in the press recently about protection of whistleblowers. So do we have a system where whistleblowers are actually...
Is the Exeter one, is that the item on our work programme? Is that the next item?
Unless I've skipped...
You might have skipped into the next one. Should we hold that whistleblower question back for that? Just for that particular item? Yeah? Is that all right, Councillor?
Yeah, I must have forgotten to turn down the corner of a page.
Brilliant. And any other points from them? Yeah, on the above line items, anything on those? No? Okay, so I would just make a couple of quick points. Obviously, no, we're not off yet. I'm making points on the general one. Sorry.
We'll need to vote on excluding the public anyway.
Yeah, we'll do that. So just obviously the cost of living crisis, okay, it's still a high score of 20. Again, without seeing what the mitigations are in place or the levers there, doesn't help us to understand that risk or how we're trying to manage and mitigate that. both externally as well as internally, and of course climate change risk to council and its residents. I'll be interested to see the methodology behind that scoring, because that is a score which is only going to continue to grow, I think, as the weeks and years pass. So that's my comments on that. We've got a below the line part of this section. I propose a vote that we go below the line and remove the public element of this meeting so we can discuss that. All in favour of that? On taking this bit below the line. I will take your point in the public forum. Please, make your point.
Given that it doesn't actually provide me any details of what the risks, how risks have been calculated, or any mitigation, I can't see any commercial interest.
The risk is
I don't see why it's not below the line.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. I think there's a more general point about why this is below the line anyway, and if there are actual financial risks. Normally, I think the monitoring officer would pick this up, but I would turn to Gareth to respond, particularly in this point where it's only the high level line. His point would be, why are we below the line on this? If you can't, we will take this below the line today. That's where it will go. But if Gareth can provide an answer or ask Leah for a further response to council.
This is a previous determination by the monitoring officer on the matter, and therefore I'm not going to challenge it.
No.
So I think there are different opinions here, broadly speaking. I think actually in practice this information is broadly speaking in the public domain, the actual risk items. But the details behind them are very confidential, very exempt. So that is why they would be the details should be here. That might be risky because the details came with the actual risks. That might be what's happened here. But I can go and check that with the monitoring officer direct, because I've raised the same question myself.
So if we could get a response from the monitoring officer to Councillor Osborne with that, and if I could be copied in, that would be great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm now proposing the vote to go and exclude the public for the below the line item. All in favour? Okay, that is, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'll go by a majority.
Okay, by a majority.
It's just a procedure.
Nobody wants a recorded vote, so that's fine. Okay, so that's a majority, and we go below the line.
Broadly
We're back now into the public section of the meeting, and we've got the final item of our agenda today, which is the item 10, which is the work programme on page 239, has been circulated to members in advance. Who's introducing this one for us? Can't be Jackie. Well, Jackie, you could introduce it if you wanted.
It doesn't really need an introduction. It is basically the work programme which works out what your meetings are for the end of the civic year.
Yeah.
So obviously there are things that dropped off which come back in June. So it's not very helpful from your point of view in that respect. But so you can see what items are coming up for the next meeting in January and also in March.
Yeah.
Which then prepares the cycle, and then back in July, which will be your next following meeting, that then starts up the cycle of where you're looking at the draft AGSs and the draft for the following years.
Yep.
Somewhere in this, and obviously I don't know when that will be coming, as nobody seems to know, is when we're going to have an extra meeting to sign off the annual government statement results report for 2021 and 22, and 22-23.
Well, it sounds like 21-22 may happen at some point.
It might. We'll be very excited by it.
Yeah, so we'll see, and obviously, members will do their utmost to facilitate that, and we'll put a drink. I'm sure the external auditors will put a drink behind the bar for us on that night. But of course they won't. Sorry,
There's
Jackie.
also your other considerations are that you are working towards your self-assessment.
Yeah.
Which I've just been talking to Teresa, who will be picking that up. Where Faye led you in a sort of like an informal session to prepare for that. We need to do that in December so that we can report through in January.
If we could do that after the huge devolution
council
meeting,
we're actually reporting. Sorry, we're reporting on self-assessment through. Yes, I know your dates. We're reporting through the self-assessment in March. Obviously, there's work that we need to do in advance of that. So we'll try and do it in December. If not, we may have to do it in early January.
That's right. I just want to reiterate thank yous for everyone who's participated in that over the last couple of years. It's been really invaluable work. So thank you. Doing the self-assessment, and then if we can continue that work and keep doing the self-assessment.
Can I just point out, I'm sorry to keep members, but the one of the last things Faye did was have a look through at the dates of some of the things. So we have slipped some things.
Yeah.
And obviously, so because we're going to meet in December, that's a November date. I think Leah's picking up some of the things about the another independent person that's been discussed elsewhere, so I don't know where that is at the moment.
Yeah, could we just make a note on that one? Is that is something that the committee really wants to see, and we certainly want someone in place ahead of the next draft statement of accounts. To get the value from that role.
And that person we were looking for was with accountancy.
Yeah. Skills and background, just to complement the committee skills.
One of the requests you put, and this is something to look as part of the self-assessment, is you were happy with the terms of reference when you did the self-assessment, but you did want to look at other things. So I've attached Exeter and Ipswich and also Oxford because they're similar. I didn't do South. We wanted Cambridge City Council, but they've got a very unusual leader cabinet thing where the cabinet members make decisions following scrutiny committees. So that wasn't really relevant. So you couldn't really compare because they have a all-purpose committee. You have to bear in mind that we have a standards committee, some councils don't. Some councils choose to discharge their function for setting the council tax through their audit committee, but our council has retained that. So I think we're covered from things, but you just have to be aware that some things are held elsewhere. And there was also the tracker. I'm pleased to say that most of everything that you had asked for through the minutes was, like requests for things to be sent to you. That was all discharged after the meeting, and obviously I'll do a tracker as you requested previously.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, before I let Councillor Sands in, thanks to the committee officer for producing an excellent report and keeping us on track.
That was with Leah as well.
With the support of the monitoring officer and internal audit officer. And also what I would say is that I've asked that the terms of reference from the other audit committees return to us when we do our next self-assessment work, so that we can actually talk about it a bit further. But any points about the particular work plan item, and I know that Councillor Sands did have a point on the terms of reference of others. Quite happy to take that now.
It's really
And then
very
I've got
minor
Councillor
point.
Osborne.
It's just in the item, additional item in the appendices on Exeter City Council, where they mention the whistleblowing policy.
Yeah.
I know we have a whistleblowing policy, but there's been some stuff in the press, I think about the last week, maybe last week and a half, whereby whistleblowers often find once they blow the whistle, their careers are at an end. So I think within a whistleblowing policy, there needs to be some protection for the whistleblowers, so to speak.
Well, I'll let officers respond, but we are doing a refresh of policy this cycle, aren't we? Isn't that happening as well? Just to remind us. But how can we get that assurance that Councillor Sands is seeking?
Should be in there, shouldn't it, as a matter of course?
Yes. This is why I don't know. I haven't read the specific.
No, that's fine.
But I will be involved in its production, I'm sure.
Well,
we have got one.
I haven't seen it. I know it exists. I haven't seen it. So
I think
that's something we can come.
We can come back to. But we'll bring the terms of reference back. But I also do think we want to see the whistleblowing policy in our function of governance here. We'd like an opportunity to comment on it at that draft stage as well. And I think that a kind of assurance process that we're looking for, there's a little bit more there, that all these whistleblowing policies have that protection, supposed protection, but there is always that fear, and sometimes that fear is actually seen through, and it stops people from whistleblowing, or it does affect their careers. I guess we would like some assurance that we are doing the very best via the standards in that area, and so if that could be a part of that report when it comes, the actual whistleblowing policy comes, because it will come.
You can make points on that. Just remind me to chase it.
I've put it on for the work programme, and I'll talk to Leah and see when.
Thank you. And quick point from Jamie, and then last points from David. I'm just looking for other members. There's no other points, so these will be the last 2 points. Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Yes, just to make sure that the points that were raised during the course of this meeting then get reflected in the work programme.
Oh yes, there was something that was coming back that looks like it come back to March. Sorry, I can't remember.
Which one?
So
Sorry.
we'll just see local governance, local partnerships governance review for NTSL, the options appraisal for NTSL, the assurance mapping for NTSL.
Yeah, the insurance mapping looks like it'll probably come back to March. That be?
I think we'll go for March.
Yeah.
If we could do it sooner, we'll get it there.
Well,
March is the MTFP, which you'll need all the support from, basically, and all the assurance. It's not really straightforward to be able to do that, to be honest with you.
It's fitting with the planning and the audit plan.
I could do with my second person here to be doing some of that as well, because they could be asking the questions. I could put a format together, a framework.
And sorry, I beg your pardon, sorry, NCSL.
So it's the local partnerships governance review.
Which is in the AGS bit.
And what the options appraisal to basically never refer to how we went about the process.
Yeah.
That's why you need to overall an exempt item, but it needs to be put together.
Happy for it to be exempt.
And have them all come together at one place.
Yes.
It might be some that's not exempt, but we'll see.
Yeah.
No, okay, but as long as those are all being actioned, that's great. Yes.
And housing compliance. I think that we discussed that we're going to have Mike, Ben.
Yeah.
We're going to have a conversation about.
Yes.
About that, I think.
Yeah. So it's what was it exactly in terms of housing compliance?
So Gareth was going to clarify. So things about what the improvement plan is, or how we're going to maintain the improvement.
Yeah, those are really important points. Thank you for reminding us. Final points from David.
If I can, yes, just on the appendix for the committee's own terms of reference. I've gone back through past meetings to actually see when the terms of reference were last reviewed, but I've been able to find a paper that talks about the reviewing the terms of reference, because of course in July last year CITFA issued some new audit committee guidance and included a suggested terms of reference. And I'd suggest that rather than looking at Exeter's, Cambridge's and whoever's, that we just in effect adopt the 6th model terms of reference. They're very
yeah. So let's pick that up. I believe we have looked at ours are fairly close aligned. When we're bringing back the self-assessment work, let's include the guidelines for terms of reference. And for your information, I think about 2 years ago, under constitutional change, that's the last time we proposed. I've made a few proposal changes to the terms of reference for the audit committee. We've got a couple through, a couple were batted back. But ultimately, yes, I think knowing when we, just as a governance perspective, understand when we review the terms of reference of all main committees at the council and what the process is for that. Are they all looked at when we do a constitutional review? Should they be looked at periodically? So just a bit more information about how we keep abreast of our terms of reference, not only for this committee, but all of the main committees, I think would be a good bit of information to have. And if the council needs a process of checking that, at certain intervals, then I think that's good that we've highlighted that today, David. So I appreciate that. So if that could if we could get.
So sorry, can we just be clear? Yeah. Sorry, it's been a long meeting.
Yeah,
I'm not quite clear. I'm a little bit thrown back the things that Councillor Osborne said. They weren't necessarily items that were coming back. Surely there were some bits that you were going to clear on the AGS. You had some points that were going to be. Well, we're not bringing the
there
AGS
were a number of questions, but there were three things. There was to get this kind of. The matrix, the flow of how,
and that's going to be a report coming back in March.
Yeah.
And then local partnerships, governance stuff. That was a bit about NCSL, was it? And the governance arrangements.
Yes.
And you'd like that to come back to committee.
I've got a proper thing.
Have a session.
A session on basically.
And exempt.
NCSL exempt. Yeah.
And then housing compliance. I'm not quite sure. The improvement plan. Did you want that as a report? Were you asking for that as a report? Because I think.
It wasn't
because that is covered in lots of other places.
Okay, is it? So, well, can you see
where
it?
Is it?
Housing compliance.
Isn't
there regular reports to cabinet?
Cabinet report on that.
Okay.
There's a cabinet report of 2 months ago on that.
Yeah, it's regular reports to cabinet.
Okay.
Do you want
but there was another point that you wanted an annual report, and that's obviously going to go as a recommendation.
Which was the recommendation.
But we don't know whether that obviously we made that recommendation. We don't know whether that's
and that was recommended.
We're on work programme now, rather than
something. Okay, so we've got the two reports. Have a look at the cabinet report and see if that's providing you the level of assurance that you need as an audit counsellor,
or as a possible screen.
Okay. We can watch back the first 20 minutes of the meeting to remind ourselves. It'll be all on YouTube tomorrow, so don't worry. So we can do that as well. Okay, so I think that we've taken all the points. I really appreciate members' time on all of these points. We've got a lot of business done, and I will close the meeting at that point and thank everyone for attending. Thank you.